Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, February 29th, 2024. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Carlos Rojas Rodriguez, immigrant justice organizer on the Democrats' right-wing pivot on immigration. And later in the show, Kina Collins, progressive candidate activist in the 7th District of Illinois, running for Congress. Also on the program today, the official death toll, a huge undercount, hits 30,000 in Gaza after the IDF opened fires on a crowd of starving Palestinians swarming a rare aid truck. The UN says 500,000 people in Gaza are on the brink of starvation as Israel continues to block most aid, and the US weighs dropping aid from the sky, which begs the question, maybe force Israel to let it in on the ground. The Supreme Court hands... Well, that wasn't a question. It's a demand. Should be, at least. The Supreme Court hands Trump a massive victory, agreeing to hear his bogus presidential immunity case, which would delay his federal election subversion trial potentially until after the election. As the Supreme Court weighs whether or not to keep Trump on the ballot, they will. An Illinois judge also rules to remove him from the primary ballot. Another court denies Trump's bid to delay his over $450 million civil fraud penalty. A government shutdown is averted, for now. A short-term funding bill has been agreed upon. But Mitch McConnell doesn't seem to think the prospects are pretty good, because he's announcing he will step down as Republican leader by the end of the year. The party's too extreme for Mitch McConnell now. That same party just blocked Tammy Duckworth's bill to protect IVF along Senate unanimous consent lines. Unanimous? Unanimous consent. Ununanimous? That wouldn't make any sense. And in the House, Republican Anna Luna mysteriously withdraws her co-sponsorship of the IVF protection bill. Alabama Republicans scramble to undo their state Supreme Court ruling because it's so bad politically. The IVF one. The Supreme Court appears divided on the legality of a Trump-era bump stock ban for machine guns. Meaning they could be to the right of Trump on this. Another botched execution in Idaho by lethal injection. Stay safe, Texas. The largest wildfire in the state's history has now burned over 1 million acres. And lastly, a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine finds that long COVID may lead to measurable cognitive decline. If you are 65 or older, go get your new COVID booster. You can do so now. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome to the show, everybody. It is Leap Day. It is Leap Day. My people may be familiar with my good friend Dan from the internet. He is a Leap Day baby. I'm giving him a shout out right at the top of the show here because that's quite rare, a Leap Day baby. So he turned 7 today. Congratulations to Dan. But yeah, only comes around every 4 years. I'm a big 30 Rock fan. There's an episode called Leap Day. My controversial opinion is it's the worst episode of the show. And I say that with a heavy heart because there's really no bad episodes. There's always good, funny stuff in every 30 Rock episode. But it's just myself and Bradley today for now, before we get joined by our friends in the fun half, Matt Binder and Brandon Sutton. Matt is on his way to go to a wedding, so he will not be with us for the rest of the week, but we do have a great show for you today. Let's start here with the Trump story. The Supreme Court has announced that it will decide whether or not Donald Trump has presidential immunity from prosecution, just generally. They've decided they'll take up the case. They could have dismissed it out of hand, and that would have meant that the trial would have been on track to take place before the 2024 general election. Now, this delays it significantly because the Supreme Court will be hearing arguments the week of April 22nd. And then they'll have to make a decision probably in June. And that is exactly what Trump wanted, because that means that the judge will not be able to hold a trial in time, most likely, for the election. Now, this could potentially change, but legal experts say it would be very difficult. The earliest, it seems like a trial on this particular case, the Jack Smith federal election interference probe, the earliest it appears it could even happen would be October. So because of the circus of the election, it seems overwhelmingly likely that this will have to happen after the election. And so the fact that they're even taking this case up is a huge, huge win for Donald Trump, because the claims that he's making are so unconstitutional on their face. Like, I don't think that the Supreme Court is going to rule in his favor. This is their way to have it both ways. They can help their buddy out, the guy that put them on the Supreme Court, the party that put them on the Supreme Court, the party that they're ideologically aligned with, while at the same time not giving the president immunity from all criminal justice. It's like the most unconstitutional thing on its face. So the D.C. Circuit Court had already shut this down. Trump appealed, and the Circuit Court decision was incredibly clear. But here's Supreme Court analyst Joan Biskrebic. She reacted here on CNN to the news, the breaking news, and this was her assessment.
But the fact that they delayed even this order that basically just says we're going to take it up, that they delayed it for 2 weeks, suggests that they certainly did not embrace the urgency that Special Counsel Jack Smith tried to impose upon them way back in December, when Jack Smith went to the Supreme Court and said, Justices, please take up this case now so that we can get a clear answer. This is yours to answer. And then, once the D.C. Circuit, once the Supreme Court said, no, we're not coming in, and the D.C. Circuit ruled, that was another several weeks. So former President Trump's effort to run the clock has a partner in the Supreme Court at this point, even though, Jake, probably in the end, the justices will agree with the D.C. Circuit and reject former President Donald Trump's claim of absolute immunity. But what good will that do for any kind of trial before we're really into the heat of this next presidential election?
That is quite aligned with my reading on this as well. There's been in the past not this claim of total immunity. I mean, it's not, as I said, not in the Constitution. It's just made up by Trump, just made up that he has legal immunity from criminal prosecution because he's the king. Oh, I mean the president. Oh, and apparently he's still the president even though he lost the election. Running for a third term. Shouldn't disqualify me, because they stole it from me. Isn't this your third term, Mr. President? I thought you're still the shadow guy, or I'm having trouble keeping track of the conspiracy theories, Bradley.
Well, it's kind of it's almost the parallel to sort of like the Biden crime family aspect that like Biden is like this doddering old man, but also the ringleader of a extremely intricate crime syndicate.
Yeah.
And then on the other end, it's like Trump because he was president, but also in some people's minds and maybe his own is still or should be president. He was spurned from his rightful presidency, should be immune from any potential criminal liability. But because the doddering old man crime syndicate leader is the so-called president, he needs to be punished and can't be immune from
that
criminal
is amazing.
Prosecution.
Yes.
So it's also that's the other I think contortion that they have to do, which is that Trump desperately needs presidential immunity for some communal reason,
right.
for some countrywide
right.
national reason,
for the Constitution.
But presumably, the second he gets in office, based on every single other public statement he's ever made, he's going to prosecute all of his political rivals, including the former president, if Biden was the former president.
I'm old enough to remember lock her up,
right,
lock her up.
And
right?
Yet presidential immunity is it's like existentially important to Trump, and also even Trump in some of his statements says like, for all presidents, not just me. Does that include Joe Biden, the guy you're very expressly like, I want to throw in jail?
Yes, it's Biden. It's anybody who opposed him. Like, I mean, he's spoken about broadly his political opponents, but even that claim, like it was, I hate immigrants, I hate Muslims, and I hate Hillary Clinton and think she's a criminal. And then, like, in the lead up to that election, Fox News was saying that even though Comey and the FBI was not going to charge her, that there was not going to be like criminal charges from the FBI or from the DOJ about this. Even with that, they said, well, she's going to obstruct further charges into her, and this is why she's such a criminal. The guy is now taking it to the Supreme Court and has stacked the Supreme Court with judges who are going to help him out. And this is the exact scenario that they claimed Hillary Clinton was going to do when she was anointed as the president in 2016, that Trump is doing in practice right now.
Yeah, it's not a novel observation on my end here, but it's like if you substituted Donald Trump's name for like a more ethnic or global South sounding name,
yes,
and say this was happening in like the Central African Republic or something like
right.
that. This would just be like a little brief news chyron of like, oh, look at this hilariously corrupt thing going on in a far-flung part of the world.
Totally. Third world. What are you going to do about it, right?
Where a former president is seeking re-election, saying the election was stolen from him. He's appointed 3 Supreme Court justices to tip the scales to hopefully render him completely immune from criminal prosecution. People will just be like, yep, things are
totally.
It's destabilizing over there.
It's so corrupt over there. And then you'll have Eric Prince come on TV and say, well, we got to recolonize Africa.
Yeah,
we've got to do it. And like, this is also not a novel thing to bring up, but the Supreme Court has ruled on a similar issue before in Nixon's instance. Back in 1974, the justices, it was the Warren Court, right? So it's more liberal, but Rehnquist was on that court, a very conservative justice. It was a unanimous decision where they decided that Nixon, who was claiming that he had executive privilege, and so they should not be able to use the sensitive information, the tapes that recorded him basically, walking through the crimes that they were going to commit, that should not be allowed to be consumed or used as evidence because, or it should be confidential for national security purposes, and he said that this was covered under executive privilege. And again, as I mentioned, the court ruled unanimously against him. Oh, I should correct myself. Rehnquist actually recused himself. Sorry, correcting myself. Rehnquist did not rule in that instance, but he was still on the court, and Clarence Rehnquist recused himself because he had ties to the Nixon administration. So it actually is quite fascinating because Clarence Thomas's wife is deeply aligned with the Trump administration and the MAGA movement, and that has been delineated many times. You think Clarence Thomas is going to recuse himself? You think Clarence Thomas is going to recuse himself from this case? I think not. So, this is quite bad news. But it's not news that anyone should be surprised by. The Supreme Court is immensely important, and it's paying dividends for Trump and the Republicans that they were so aggressive, so laser focused on the judiciary, and we are facing the effects of that, and will be facing the effects of that for decades and decades to come. All right, we are going to be speaking to Carlos Rojas Rodriguez very shortly about immigration, but first, we have a word from one of our wonderful sponsors. Do you get into bed and start checking all of your social media apps, and then all of a sudden 45 minutes have passed, and you're just scrolling at nighttime, and you look at the clock and freak out because, gosh, you got to go to bed, you got to get up for work in the morning, but you're so overstimulated from your phone? Look, I'm speaking from experience here. Calm, though, can help you form new and healthy bedtime habits this year. The Calm app puts the tools that you need to feel better in your back pocket. If you go to calm.com/majority, you'll get a special offer of 40% off a Calm premium subscription, and the content is added every week. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, giving you the power to calm your mind and change your life. Calm recognizes that everyone faces unique challenges in their daily lives, that mental health needs differ from person to person, and that time for meditation may vary. And since self-practices are so deeply personal, Calm strives to provide content that caters to your preferences and needs. Their meditations range from focuses on anxiety and stress, relaxation, and focus to building habits and taking care of your physical well-being. They have sleep stories with hundreds of titles to choose from, including sleep meditations and calming music that will have you drifting off to dreamland quickly and naturally. They even have expert-led talks on topics such as tips for overcoming stress and anxiety, handling grief, improving self-esteem, caring for relationships, and more. Stress less, sleep more, and live better with Calm. I have struggled to actually try to have discipline with meditation. Calm has helped me immensely. My fiance is just actually good at this stuff, and he was trying to teach me, and I'm like, I can't do this. I need something else. I need an app that's going to keep me on track with this. And Calm, with all of their options, really does help me out, and it makes my mind kind of just slow down and stop racing ahead. So I couldn't recommend it more highly. For listeners of the show, Calm is offering an exclusive offer of 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/majority. Go to calm.com/majority for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. That's calm.com/majority, calm.com/majority for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. Thank you, Calm, for sponsoring this program. And we're going to take a quick break and speak with Carlos Rojas Rodriguez in a second. We are back, and we are joined now by Carlos Rojas Rodriguez, longtime immigrant justice organizer and former staffer for the Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign. Carlos, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So recently, the Democrats and the Biden administration backed an extremely right-wing border deal that included Ukraine and Israel aid. It was an effort to get aid to Ukraine. That's what the Democrats, I guess, specifically in the Senate, like those on the Senate Armed Services Committee and those who are more connected to, there are many Democratic senators, I would say, that think that the fight, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, is existential, and sending money to Ukraine is really important. And I support sending money to Ukraine with conditions. But the Israel stuff to fund the genocide, that was also a part of it. And so, of course, there's a lot of controversy on that end. And then the Republicans in the House are not in favor of Ukraine money because they're now pro-Putin-ish. And so to get it over the hump, the Biden administration and Democrats decided we're going to go so far to the right on immigration and give the Republicans everything they want. Now, thankfully, the Republicans in the House just decided, well, we're killing this because of Ukraine aid, and the Democrats were saved here, in my opinion, from Republican extremism. But that's a brief recap of how we got to this point. I mean, what was your reaction when you saw all of that hawkish border language in the bill? And if you could explain to our audience what it looks like and what it really means.
Yeah, so we started hearing these rumors, I would say, back in October, November. And, we just couldn't believe what was being presented to us. The traditional compromise on immigration, I would say, since like the late Bush years, all of the Obama years, and right before Trump got in office, was a agreement between border security for citizenship for millions of undocumented immigrants in the United States. And I, had reservations about that deal because I don't think that we need to militarize the border. And there's a clear incentive for immigrants to arrive to this country. But, at least us who work in the immigrant rights spaces, we had something to fight for. And to go from there, to this new agreement, which is basically a wish list of Trump on immigration, including hiring more ICE and CBP agents, militarizing the border, encouraging governors like Abbott, continuing to create their own CBP and ICE agencies at the state level for funding for pointless wars, occupations, and genocide, right? And this really sent a message to us in the immigrant rights space that we're really bargaining chips in the eyes of the Democratic Party, right? I feel like we expect this kind of treatment from the Republicans who have embraced a extreme anti-immigrant narrative. But to see the Biden administration concede into that narrative and spearhead these negotiations and sending a clear message to the Democrats in Congress that this is a request from the White House has definitely set us years, if not decades back when it comes to the immigration struggle and the fight for immigrant rights.
So can you mentioned it there, if you could touch on what the shift in mindset for the Democrats has been since the Obama administration. As you say, the DREAM Act did not succeed in Congress under Obama, but there still was this messaging and this desire to protect Dreamers, and he did do some individual executive actions to protect Dreamers. This was just 10, 12 years ago at this point, but there is no effort from the Biden administration to approach this topic from that angle. How have things devolved to this point?
Well, I would even say that they've devolved to the point that we can't even recognize the president's actions and rhetoric and policies, right? So during the campaign trail in 2020, back then candidate Biden was repeatedly questioned by activists and also at debate stages by other candidates about the 3 million deportations that took place under the Obama administration, right? 3 million people that have been deported that the Obama administration promised to legalize and never happened, right? And even with those actions, at least back then, we had helpful narratives, helpful rhetoric, the embracement of the DACA program, a commitment for a pathway to citizenship. And even though there wasn't a clear path in Congress to do it, we could at least rely on a president that would say, that would have a helpful rhetoric to advance the cause for immigrant rights. Now, during the campaign trail in 2020, Biden actually apologized and said that the efforts to deport 3 million people were misguided. He made promises to end private detention, right? This is the existence of private corporations that function like hotels. They create contracts with ICE, and they basically make money by detaining undocumented immigrants, thus creating an incentive for anti-immigrant legislation at the state and local level to keep those beds full. So Biden promised to end private detention. He also promised to end cooperation between police and ICE, and ending programs like the 287G agreements, which forces local police departments to act as ICE agents at the local level, which creates distrust between, the immigrant community and law enforcement. Now, we expected, right, that come 2020, 2021, we would see a president take executive action to end 287G programs, which he can do by executive authority. We expected an announcement that would prohibit private detention centers from existing. And we have seen the complete opposite. We have seen efforts to expand Trump-era policies that he criticized, like Title 42. We have seen horrific images, right, of Haitian Black immigrants being whipped on horseback at the border. We have seen Vice President Kamala Harris, during her visit to Central America, tell people not to come to the United States without offering any solutions for these countries that have been victims, of U.S. foreign economic policies and also military policies for the last 50 years. So to arrive today, 2024, right, and hearing that President Biden is making a visit to the border today, hearing rumors that there might be announcements of policies through executive action that just cave to this anti-immigrant rhetoric that right-wing extremists in the Republican Party have created is really disheartening. It is a disappointment, and we see it as a betrayal to the promises that he made during the campaign trail.
You were, and I did not realize this, Carlos, because I remember this video quite clearly. You were one of the folks in the audience that asked Biden a question about his immigration policy, and that was the response when he said you should just vote for Trump. I remember that quite clearly in my mind because at the time, the primary was still competitive, and it was just such a shocking answer to give to somebody who was just speaking about the condition of immigrants in this country. I mean, what was that like, asking him that question? And does it surprise you that he's decided to go down this road?
Yeah, we were at a town hall in South Carolina, and we have brought parents who have had family members either detained or deported, right? And when Biden was running for president, there was a clear question in our heads. So under the Obama administration, while he sat as vice president, the second most powerful person in the country, right? He saw the Obama administration deport 3 million people. Now, we had parents engaged with Biden at a town hall, really asking whether we can trust him to be the president, knowing that when he was vice president, 3 million deportations took place. Now, he went on just sharing some basic talking points about Dreamers and DACA, but we had older people in the room. We had undocumented parents who don't qualify for DACA, who have been waiting for a pathway to citizenship for years, if not decades. And the only question that we had for him was whether he would promise to stop the mass deportation crisis. Now, I think he got very defensive. And I think that this is a rhetoric that we have seen from Democrats when it comes to many progressive issues, right? That if if you don't like the status quo and what we have to offer, then you can go ahead and support the worst of the two evils, right? So you can go ahead and support Trump. And I think that that's what he was trying to say. Well, if you don't like what I have to offer, then you can go ahead and vote for Trump, knowing that his policies would probably be worse than what we have. Now, fast forward to 2023, if I just move to the United States and I just experience immigration policy for what it is, I really can't tell you the difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration, because Biden has actively expanded anti-immigrant policies from the Trump era that he promised to eradicate. We are seeing an immigration crisis that is really affecting the nation. And we're seeing Republicans use the anti-immigrant rhetoric to really energize their base. But we don't see a counterweight on the Democratic side. We just see a concession and further pushing to the right on immigration during an election year. And it is 2024. I'm really concerned about, Biden's chances for re-election. Not saying that he should be the president that we have, but when we think about Trump and Biden, clearly, when Trump was in office, the immigrant community was terrified. It was even hard to organize and mobilize people because we really thought that we were going to be rounded up by ICE. And the message that I have for Democrats, right, is that when Obama, under the pressure of undocumented youth, issued the DACA program on the summer of 2012, the summer before his presidential re-election, it made sense for immigrant rights organizations and the movement to transition from a campaign on policy and trying to really pass things to electoral cycle, right? Because we felt that we had at least won some protections for undocumented youth. Now, this year, there is no motivation, there is no incentive. I am in community meetings with directly impacted people that have campaigned for Democrats for years, and they're really asking, what are we really fighting for? It just feels like we're fighting against something, but there's nothing to fight for. And like the latest negotiations that we have seen, mixing border security with foreign aid for genocide, occupation, and pointless wars, really make it clear that we don't have a path forward on immigration. And just like many other constituencies, my fear is that, young people, immigrants, who have family members who are citizens, who have kids that have been born here, don't really have a motivation to go to the polls in November.
I know that you don't have too much time, so I wanted to ask you this before we have to say goodbye to you. What is the alternative vision for the Democrats? What could they do to differentiate their messaging? We've seen when they try to be Republican light, they just embolden Republican messaging. I mean, what's really needed is a standardized, modernized process to bring people through so they can go through the system in a humane way and have their asylum claims heard. Militarism only creates more death and insecurity for migrants that will cross anyway, but they'll be beholden to cartels, they'll be in danger for their lives. I mean, what does militarism look like, and what should the alternative path be for the Democrats? Border militarism, I mean to say.
I would say that first, the path that they should stop taking is embracing this anti-immigrant rhetoric and policies, right? When you present Biden and Trump to the general population, I would say that mostly every voter would assume that Trump would be tougher on immigration. So Biden trying to court voters, right, or putting, this supplemental bills to militarize the border, I don't really think politically creates any base of voters that would say, you know what, if my issue is border security, then I think that Biden would be better than Trump on border security, right? Trump is the person who created this narrative. So you really can't make a political case for Biden to out-Trump Trump on his own policies, right? Now, I think that we are at a point in place, and just to mention Michigan, for example, a couple of days ago, where there is an all-time high discouragement of the Democratic base or the traditional Democratic base to actually be energized to go to the polls in November. We need to offer a counter vision to what the Trump administration did during their years in office. And this, as you have highlighted, means that we really look to reduce the backlog that we have on immigration. We need judges being able to make determination on this case. We need policies that allow people to come forward, make a claim to be in this country and have the right, to a process where they're treated fairly. And we also need compassion, and we just need to remember that we all come from somewhere, that these visa quotas that we have today were a racist effort to just really limit the people that were coming from. When folks were coming from Europe, we basically had an open border policy, right? Where you just get a medical screening and that's all you need to do. But when people started coming from the global south, then all of a sudden we saw a need to restrict in immigration, and also people, I migrated myself. I'm an undocumented, I used to be an undocumented immigrant for 12 years in this country. I remember my parents going through the decision-making process, and it took us years to really land on the decision that we wanted to leave our loved ones, our community, our language. My mom was a teacher and she loved her profession. She knew that she would have to trade a dream job for probably a factory job, which she worked for nearly 20 years, and she did it because she saw no path forward for us in Peru, So what I would say is that countries in the global south need support. They need financial help, and instead of expending billions of dollars on foreign wars, occupations and genocide, we can actually support countries get back on their feet, so that next time that Kamala Harris goes to Central America, she doesn't just tell people not to go home, but actually offers solutions in the form of infrastructure programs and financial help for people that are fleeing north. Immigrants are forced to make these decisions. If we had a better quality of life in our home countries, we wouldn't be here in the first place. And just to remind viewers, some of these policies that are forced, some of the conditions that are forcing people to migrate were, initiated by the CIA, by the School of the Americas, by by supporting military dictatorships, and really also, we don't talk about free trade a lot, all of these programs like NAFTA, CAFTA, that basically create open borders for U.S. corporations to set shop anywhere in South America, Central America, and Mexico, have displaced business owners and farm workers because they have no way to compete with the infrastructure that these corporations have. So, a lot of times people tell me, do you support open borders? And I feel like that's a really unfair question when literally companies have open borders because we have created policies that allow them to go anywhere they want on Earth. We have, in the name of globalization, put poor people and working class people in conditions where they're forced to migrate. So I would just remind people that everyone who is coming here with their children, crossing Rio Grande, right, making this journey, sometimes 2,000, 3,000 miles, I would really just ask them, receive them, welcome them with love and compassion, because they are forced to be here. They really don't want to be here, until I really became Americanized. I didn't really want to live in this country because I really felt the racism as well, so that's my message.
I really appreciate it. And yeah, that's such a great point about globalization. Globalization for capital, but not for human beings. Thank you so much, Carlos Rojas Rodriguez, immigrant rights organizer, former staffer for the Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be speaking to congressional candidate in Illinois, Kina Collins. We are back, and we are joined now by Kina Collins, candidate for Congress in the 7th Congressional District, longtime activist in Illinois, in Chicago. Kina, thanks so much for coming on the program today.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be back.
It's good to talk to you. We were chatting about this briefly because our previous interview has a lot of resonance right now for Chicago, because Greg Abbott is posturing per usual, saying that migrants should be sent to Chicago so they can deal with them in the same way he was doing that for New York, and Ron DeSantis for Martha's Vineyard, just treating human beings as pawns in this way. As somebody who's been involved in Chicago activism and community organizing for so long, what's your reaction to some of that rhetoric and what you're seeing in the city?
I couldn't agree more that the talking point about we don't have a problem with open borders for companies that go into countries and exploit a workforce to build global economies, obviously of some of the strongest global economies that we know. And I think what's happening in Chicago is no different with that talking point. What I've been really proud about is how the community has stepped up with mutual aid efforts. And, what Greg Abbott meant for bad, the people of Chicago mean for good. And I think that we've had this moment where we've had to contend with communities that haven't had the resources, like the African American community, for example, who feels that, we don't have enough resources to give everybody. And what activists and organizers on the ground, have been activating community members with is that we can't move with a scarcity mindset. We have to center the voices of those who've been left behind, like the African American community, and talk about their agenda and the things that they need. And we also have to say it's not okay for people to be sleeping on the floors in police stations, migrants and new arrivals and new Chicagoans, right? So it's been interesting to watch, but I've been very proud of community really stepping up and with open arms and welcoming new arrivals in Chicago.
Well, to get a little bit into your background in Chicago, you are running for Congress. It's the 7th congressional district in Illinois. You're up against a very, very, very long-term incumbent. I mean, how long has he been in Congress, Congressman Davis?
Over a quarter century.
Wow. Okay. And
he's been my representative since I was 5 years old.
You've challenged him before as well, right? And your first try, there was a big gap, but you closed it a lot in your second try, and now third time's the charm, hopefully, here. Talk about why, knock on wood, I just did it. Talk a little bit about why you decided to go for this for a third time.
We built the largest field apparatus that this district had seen in a generation. We out fundraised the incumbent 2-1, didn't take a dime of corporate PAC money. And anybody who knows anything about politics, you don't even have to live in Chicago. You know that the Chicago machine is unmatched. And so Congressman Davis called in all of the Democratic leadership, from our governor to the mayor. Hakeem Jeffries came and stumped in the district. Nancy Pelosi came to stump in the district. And then in the 11th hour, as those final polling numbers were coming in, Joe Biden actually endorsed in our district, which President Biden only endorsed in 3 Democratic primaries, and we were one of them last midterm. And so I think what we really showed was our organizing prowess. We showed that we were right. And to take on a stalwart like Danny Davis, who has accepted so much corporate PAC money, and say that it's time for a new breed of leadership to step up in Chicago, in the Illinois 7th, and then to lose by 1 city ward, and let the people in the city of Chicago and in the western suburbs know that we could do this. And so we're back to finish what we start, because we don't believe in abandoning the movements that we build.
What is his record? I mean, what does he stand for? I know that recently he's been one of the most absent members of Congress in terms of votes. What are his policies, and how do yours differ?
Well, what's interesting is Congressman Davis actually came in as extremely progressive. He was a lot like our campaign 40 somewhat years ago. Right. And I think that's the issue that we have both in the Democratic Party and just in the political system, is that people get into these seats and then they get complacent. And so aside from him being one of the Democrats in our delegation to miss some of the most votes of anybody in the delegation, Congressman Davis has been absent on the Israel-Gaza situation, right? The merciless bombings that have been happening against innocent Gazan people. He hasn't really stood with the community on that. He continues to take corporate PAC donations. As a matter of fact, he has accepted campaign donations from the GEO Group, which is the 2nd largest private prison contractor in the globe, right? In a plurality African-American district with a median age of 35, we are a prime targeted district for those private prison mass carceral systems to profit off of and throw into jail. And so we need somebody who's going to speak with a moral authority. I also like to talk about how Illinois 7 has the largest life expectancy gap in the nation. Between downtown Chicago, you live to the age of about 90. If you travel a 30-minute car ride to the south side of Chicago, which is also in our district, you live to the age of 60. So it's a 30-year life gap based off of a 30-minute car ride. And we want a congressperson that's not going to accept corporate PAC dollars from pharmaceutical industry and big insurance companies.
That all is definitely in keeping with progressive values, for sure. And also your background, I think, is really notable. I think I mentioned it earlier. that you have a long history of activism, the fact that you began to organizing in response to police brutality, Laquan McDonald in particular. What was your journey like in activism, and how did it get you to the point where you wanted to make change as a congresswoman?
I think this is just like a full circle moment. The district that I'm running in and the neighborhood that I live in is the same neighborhood that Chairman Fred Hampton used to organize in and was ultimately assassinated in, right? So when we talk about a class struggle, when we talk about building rainbow coalitions, and when we talk about holding accountability for major entities and institutions like the Chicago Police Department, this is in my blood. This is in my DNA. And so I think, the journey has been one where it's been an eye-opening experience. I think when you're an organizer in the city of Chicago, you get a world-class crash course in taking on some of the most corrupt politicians and some of the most corrupt policies. And so when we get to Washington, D.C., the style of governing that I will be implementing is a co-governing style. And I think that comes from that organizing background, that I'm coming as one, but I stand as 10,000, right? My community is coming with me. My community is standing as an accountability metric for us. And so when we talk about not taking corporate PAC dollars in our campaign, when we talk about grassroots organizing, when we talk about taking on stalwarts like Danny Davis, all of that comes from that accountability metric and that organizing experience that I got firsthand on the front lines of those protests and in public policy rooms.
What are some of the other areas of passion for you as a candidate? For example, public schools, gun violence. I know that has been part of what you've advocated for in the past. How would that translate, and how does that, I guess, translate to your platform as a candidate?
Yeah, public safety is often the number one issue on polls for a lot of voters. And, gun violence prevention is my number one issue. As a child, I actually witnessed another young person gunned down in my community, and I knew the victim and I knew the shooter, and it changed the entire trajectory of my life. And what I also knew was that the bullet was flying long before anybody pulled the trigger, right? When we shut down public schools, when we gut wraparound services and mental health in communities, when we don't build strong local economies for people, all of that is structural violence, and it's the bullet flying. And so I've went from being a survivor of gun violence, a public policy expert, on to even being tapped by the Biden administration to advise their senior policy advisors on common sense gun safety legislation. And so all of it has really been tied in telling that story to voters, that over policing our communities are not going to be the ways that we keep each other safe. We keep each other safe, right? And so we have to strike at the root causes of what causes that. And violence, at least in our district and really all across this country, the root cause is poverty. And you're not going to be able to police poverty away. And so having that voice as a survivor, as a public policy expert, I think has really captivated voters in the district and brought them our way. The final thing I'll say is I'm really, really passionate about universal health care, specifically single payer Medicare for all. Before running for office, I worked for Physicians for a National Health Program, where I turned actual doctors into activists fighting for a single payer Medicare for all healthcare system in the country. And that's going to be one of my top issues and priorities when I get to Congress.
And can you also differentiate yourself, because you're not the only candidate running in this race in the primary, but clearly you are the one who's gotten the closest to toppling the incumbent. So, I mean, what is the status of your race with some of the other candidates running in the primary?
I think it's all eyes on us on election night. And this is a time for the progressives to shine. This is why it's important to come on shows like this one and tell progressives across the country to get on board and help us in these last few weeks leading into the election cycle. We lost our race by 4,600 votes. That is a field margin.
Wow.
That means that a handful of precincts was the difference between us electing somebody who has been there for over 2 decades, going on 3 decades, and somebody who is hungry and ready to really fight for the people, and who's been on the front lines in these last, in this last decade of this progressive fight. And so I think the Chicago media, we really made people respect the progressive movement in this district. We really made people respect underdog candidates in this race. And this is going to be the most competitive primary in Illinois on election night. And so, I'm just calling on, if you believe in these same values, help us in these last few weeks get across the finish line.
Has Brandon Johnson, mayor of Chicago, weighed in on this race? And what's your relationship with him? Because that was a fairly exciting victory for folks who were invested in, like I'm in Brooklyn right now, and our mayor is a right-wing cop. So Brandon Johnson looks like just a much better option. What has his reaction been to your race, and has he weighed in?
So the mayor has not officially weighed into the race. Brandon was my commissioner before he became the mayor. So me and Brandon have a really good relationship. We were close before he became mayor. The mayor he's working on a lot of things. And so in the city of Chicago, and it's been a steep learning curve for him. And he's getting his footing, and he's had some great progressive victories under his belt in the short period that he's been in. But there's also a lot of things that he's working on that I think has taken his attention. I don't know if the mayor will weigh in on this race. But what I will say is we're not just leaning on endorsements to win this election. When we ran last time and almost won this seat, we probably had 2, maybe 3 elected officials that endorsed us, right? We came into this election cycle with over 20 elected officials across the district who have endorsed this campaign, over 15 community organizations, right? So we have united the progressive space in this district, and they're behind and united behind our campaign. And that's what we're looking forward to. The only endorsement I'm looking forward to is the voters in this district.
I got you. Wrapping up here, but how many times have people compared your campaign to Cori Bush's, in the sense that both community organizers, both of you are activists that came out of kind of police brutality opposition? Also, Cori Bush ran against the incumbent, lost before, and then came around and ended up winning. Do you see inspiration in her campaign?
I love Representative Bush, and she's really been such a source of wisdom for me. I personally, obviously, I was endorsed by the Justice Democrats in the previous election cycle. So obviously, Cori is a part of that political family. And the Sunday after I lost, Cori gave me a call in the true fashion of a pastor, right? She's a minister. So she gave me a call, and I basically told Cori, like, I don't think, I could do this again. And Cori, just gave me words of encouragement and told me her story about how she had to run 3 times, before she got into Congress, and to really just keep my head up. And so I've been really encouraged by Cori Bush. I've been seeing how she's been standing strong for the Palestinian people against all adversity. And I think that strong moral compass is something that not even candidates and electeds, but just like organizers and people in the community should be very proud of. So I'm looking forward to joining Cori and Congress, and everybody has compared us to Cori Bush.
Okay, good. I'm not breaking new ground here, but I mean, it's good. It's good for me to hear that she called you and was such a source of support, because we've been so impressed by her and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar speaking and sticking their necks out, particularly on this straightforward moral issue of stopping the massacre in Gaza. Now, when is your primary? When is your primary, and how can people help out your campaign?
So the primary is March 19th. We are doing canvases every single day. And if you don't live in the state or close by in the region, you can phone bank and text bank remotely. You could go to KinaCollins.com and sign up on our volunteer page. And please, like I said, we are a grassroots people-powered campaign. And so any last-minute donations would be extremely helpful. So please go to KinaCollins.com, hit the volunteer button, hit the donate button, and help us get across the finish line.
Kina Collins, I'll be rooting for you from afar, and we will put the link to your website and all of those links that you mentioned in the description of our podcast and at majority.fm, and also YouTube description. Thanks so much, Kina. I really appreciate your time today, and good luck.
Thank you.
All right. Quick break, guys, and are we going to be speaking to... all right. So, all right, we're gonna probably go into the fun half. We're trying to get in contact with. Sam has mentioned this a few times on the program. A fundraiser for a family in Gaza. We're potentially going to be speaking to a member of this family, Mohammed Al-Dagma, and we'll put this up here on the screen. Bradley's getting it together. But his family is stuck in Gaza. He is in Belgium at this point. He's been supporting his family, and he is deeply concerned about his niece, Afaf. She has Down syndrome. And they desperately need supplies. They're living down in the south of Gaza, near the Egyptian border. And they are one of the many families just living day to day trying to survive this genocide. And I know people, I think, are struggling to wonder, how can we help? How can I make a difference right now because my government seemingly refuses to do so? And this is one way that you can. We will put a link to this down below wherever you're listening to or watching this. They have a 60,000 euro goal, and they're a little over halfway there at this point. So if you have the ability, please take the time to look at this fundraiser on GoFundMe and try to help this family in Gaza. We will be speaking more about Gaza, and I want to do a very deep dive into the wonderful work by The Intercept, per usual. Ryan Grimm, Jeremy Scahill, and I think Daniel Boguslaw, co-authored a piece very extensively debunking, maybe not debunking, but showing how deeply negligent and propagandistic this piece was, that, on October 7th in the mass rape that was alleged in this explosive front page New York Times piece, at the time I saw that and I said, I don't have many doubts that sexual violence occurred. It was a brutal attack on October 7th, and that would not be out of the norm. But I was perplexed by the lack of real first-person accounts in this piece. I'm not going to cast aspersions on somebody making claims that they were assaulted until I get evidence really to the contrary, but it did seem suspect. And the evidence to the contrary about this piece of journalism, I say in quotes in the New York Times, is overwhelming at this point. So great job by, at the very least, the reporting is quite shoddy at the, and we'll go into the details of that in the fun half. Bradley, do you know what's happening on Left Reckoning? Bradley's going to pull that up. But in the meantime, you can go to ESVN and you can see Bradley and I ripping into Doc Rivers, which is a favorite pastime of mine, and his consistent throwing of his players under the bus and excuse making. We also spoke about the NCAA football game and EA Sports ripping off college players with a very measly sum to pay for their likeness. And we then did a little bit of a a draft ranking the best Super Bowls in the 21st century, youtube.com/ESVN show. And Matt is not here with us, so Bradley will pull up Left Reckoning and tell us.
Yeah, so it's Matt and David before Matt left for the wedding that for David Griscom's wedding, actually.
I didn't know if we were supposed to reveal such a thing.
Oh well, Matt said it. Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Well, anyway, congratulations to David. I didn't know if that was like a secret. So there we go.
No, I think it's okay. They spoke to Alex Hockley of the BungaCast to discuss his review of 3 different books on the failures of the past decade of the left populism in the American Affairs Journal. So youtube.com/Left Reckoning for that, as well as patreon.com/Left Reckoning to access the post game. And also, everybody.
What? Oh! Don't forget to get out the void.
Do not forget to get out the void. I actually just purchased my own Get Out the Void t-shirt.
Why did you buy it?
Because I want to support the show.
Your employer?
I want to support my employer.
I want one for free, Sam.
I'm a huge company man.
I actually really desperately want Get Out the Void because of how stupid it is. Because of how incredibly stupid it is. How it was a throwaway inside joke that I just we'll say that on occasion. We'll say we want to make a t-shirt out of that and then we'll just forget. But the fact that Sam immediately went and got these made without really any other further discussion was just shocking to me because it's just that random and just that funny. I desperately need to Get Out the Void shirt, but also on shop.majorityreportradio.com, you can get the Majority Report Days of the Week t-shirt, which has Hump Day, Newsday Tuesday, and Majority Report. You can get a Whoopsie t-shirt, lots of fun stuff. Go to shop.majorityreportradio.com. Our merch is very fun, and you can support us in the process.
So the sale, it's $25 for the Get Out the Void t-shirt. The sale ends March 13th, and they will be delivered. They will be shipped out after the sale is over.
Thank you very much, Bradley. We don't have Brandon yet, but let's just head into the fun half since we're a little shorthanded and Matt can tell us what's happening on Doomed and Scam Economy. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman!
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Denner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what? A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back, and we are joined by Matt Binder. Hello, Matt Binder.
Hello, how are you doing, Emma?
I am doing well. I am doing quite well. Brandon had something come up, so I don't know if we're going to have Brandon. So it's just you, myself, and Bradley today. Look at that.
Ah, all right. And Matt Luck is MIA too.
Exactly. He's on his way to Griscom's wedding. So David Griscom's wedding.
Congratulations, David Griscom. Yeah.
Yes. So we are going to hopefully hear from our guest in a second to speak about this fundraiser. Mohammed should maybe be with us by phone, but for now, Binder, what's happening on Doomed and Scam Economy?
Oh, well, basically, this week I went on another show and multi-streamed to my channel in lieu of, it was the same time frame as Doomed usually streams. So just did that instead. It's Left Past 10, a panel show that includes Matt from the Letter Hack, of the letter, aka the Letter Hack, I should say. So definitely check that out. It's on my channel at youtube.com/Matt Binder. We talked about everything that happened this week. A lot happened this week, as you know. Yeah, it's a busy week.
Busy week.
And then, of course, tonight, Leftist Mafia at youtube.com/Matt Binder as well. Join me. Matt, well, I am Matt. Me, the Humanist Report, Rational National, Lance the Serfs, and Rebecca, who some of you might know from Ben Dixon's show. Check that out at youtube.com/Matt Binder at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
All right. Do we have him by any chance? Okay. All right. We're still trying to reach Mohammed. So I'll read some IMs for a sec. Charlie Sheher says, I literally got into an argument at work listening to my coworkers bitch about how Biden's giving immigrants houses and free money. And when I tried to point out that Biden tried to give the Republicans everything they wanted on immigration, they angrily shut me down. I'm so pissed off with the Dems right now. Yeah. A void of no confidence says the utter lack of daylight between Joe Biden and Republican border policy is abhorrent. It's absurd. Dave from Jamaica, I was looking at old speeches of H. Bush and Reagan. Dems are now to the right of them on immigration. Yep. Noah from Tampa, Brandon Johnson is on the spectrum of a mayor of a big city is very good. On the spectrum of a mayor in a big city is very good. But in the limited time I've been in Chicago, he's done some good things. He's done some things that raise an eyebrow. The first of which was ending the city contract with ShotSpotter. Then on the day the contract was set to expire, he renewed it for another 5 years. The second thing is he's trying to use city funds to develop the new White Sox Stadium in West Loop, West Downtown, and it was originally just going to be a private venture. And now, I know, Pritzker out-lefted Brandon Johnson on that. Pritzker came out in opposition to that. And now the thing is, and now this thing about not endorsing the progressive who grew up in his administrative neighborhood, not a good look. I hear you on that. Do you, I am Hamas says, is MR crew at all concerned about the Days of the Week shirt being a schedule of Hamas members? Yeah, I know. We're looking into that. It's
concerning.
I'm seeing now it's on CNN, and they are and they're reporting that it's a Hamas terror list. All right, we actually have our guest really briefly joining us on the phone lines here. Mohammed Al-Dagma. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Are you there, Mohammed?
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Everyone, you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. How do I say your full name?
Yeah, Muhammad Al-Dagma. Same exactly like what you say.
Okay, good. So we've been talking a bit about your family and have been linking to the GoFundMe for your family in Gaza. I know that you have an 8-year-old niece who has Down syndrome, and they are trapped in South Gaza right now. Can you give us a sense of how they're doing and what the situation is like for them?
Yeah, I'm going to thank you for this support, for this calling, for inviting me to this meet. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone who will donate and support us. My family doing now, they live in a tent in Rafah city, close to the Egyptian borders. And I have all members of my family there. My father, my mother, and my 2 brothers, 2 sisters with their kids. And there is like intent, and the situation is really bad, and they are scared. Like the last time, the area where they lived, they get bombed from airstrike, and the tent get some damage also from this airstrike. And they suffering like from hunger, from everything actually, from scary, from this war.
How are they trying to leave Gaza right now?
Yeah. That's the reason that I made this donation link, the fundraiser, to like get money to pay for them. If you want to leave Gaza, you have to pay for Egyptian borders at least. There is some office, they ask between 5,000 to 7,000 American dollars to per person, just to evacuate to Egypt.
So
and they don't have this money.
A bribe to the Egyptians to get out of Gaza, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that we've heard many reports of that, and it seems to be the only way people are able to leave. But of course, those who had the money already were able to meet those demands, but many are not, including your family, which is why we're trying to support you. What is the state of healthcare for your niece who has Down syndrome? How is she reacting to this ongoing genocide around her?
Yeah, Afaf, she's my niece, and she has Down syndrome. Actually, she was before the war. She get like a lot of medical problem with her teeth, with her stomach, and also sorry for my bad. My English it's not really perfect. I'm trying to write the exactly problem with her and translate in English, and then I can say it in the right way.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that, Mohammed. It's okay if you're unable to articulate it. I think we can understand.
I have some reporters from my sister. I can send it to you.
Yes.
With the WhatsApp, it's gonna be easy for me to, and you can understand more better because I don't know exactly.
Yes.
How to say it in English.
Well, let's put up your GoFundMe on the screen here, and we can read how the funds will be used. 54,000 migration fees, the bribe, as we say, for Afaf and the family. 5,000 for food supplies. They need food. 1,000 for travel permits and transportation. That is what is needed to get your family out through the Egyptian border. Can you speak more about their how urgent this is? Yes.
Like, if I want to evacuate all of them, they are like 10 person. Like, if I want to pay for everyone like 5,000 per person to get out from Gaza to Egypt, I have to pay 50,000 to this one office. It's named Hala office in Egypt. And this one, they take per adult like 5,000, between 5,000 to 7,000. But if you want to pay 5,000, you have to wait this list. There is a list, and you have to wait until your name is coming. But if you are like emergency, you want to pay 7,000, you can get out fast than this list. And if they leave Gaza, there is no option or any way to go just to Egypt, and I have to pay for them rent in any apartment in Egypt, and I have to pay for them food every time. Then there is no one can send them anything instead of me. We lost everything, our home for the second time. So that the money actually is going to paying for the evacuate to Egypt. Now I get almost like 30,000. I'm trying to evacuate my sister and with her kids and my mother. I have talked to someone who is working in this office, and he promised me that in the next week he will evacuate only my sister with her kids and my mom. And yeah.
Well, Mohammed, we we're putting this link everywhere, and we will be posting it to get you to that 60,000 euro goal. We are, praying for you and your family, and I'm hoping that our audience can come together and we'll be able to help your family in this extreme time of need. Thank you for calling in and sharing your story.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I want to thank everyone who is posting, who's sharing and donate for me and for my family. I really appreciate it. Thank you from my heart.
Thank you so much.
Amazing from you.
Thank you, Mohammed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm glad we were able to reach him. As I said at the back half of at the end of the first hour, you can find the links in the description, the link to this fundraiser in particular in the description of this podcast or of this YouTube broadcast, and at majority.fm we'll be posting all of that. This is a situation so many families are facing right now, but if we can just help one family in this dire situation in the midst of this genocide, I'd like to. So, let's Binder. I mean, you are a reporter that covers misinformation, right? Like you're pretty good at that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yes, I do cover misinformation.
You do
from
the right.
Right, and not just from the right. Honestly, it's all over the place now.
Apparently in the New York Times. Apparently in the New York Times.
Right. Yeah.
So if you'll allow me, I would like to do a deep dive into this incredible piece written by friend of the show, many friends of the show, the team over there at The Intercept, Ryan Grimm, Murtaza, no, it wasn't Murtaza, I apologize. It's not a friend of the show there, but not on this piece. Ryan Grimm, Jeremy Scahill, and Daniel Boguslaw had this bombshell report, honestly, where they did a deep dive into the cover story on October 7th and the alleged mass rape that occurred on October 7th against Israelis by Hamas. Now, when I first read that initial report, there's some red flags about the lack of first-person testimony, much of it being fairly vague, but at the time, you have to assume in an attack like this that many kinds of violence are perpetrated, and sexual violence is quite common in wartime. You can obviously not rule out that Hamas committed sexual violence on October 7th. You can't rule it out after this explosive report by The Intercept going into what the New York Times was alleging. You can't rule it out either, but this at the very least casts immense doubt on the claims that were made in this piece that wasn't just a one-off. It was on the front page of the Times, and it was published at a time when public opposition to Israel's assault on Gaza was mounting, and it had clearly a strategic purpose. And so for those who are not familiar at this point, let's put this piece up on the screen. This is what Ryan, Jeremy Scahill, Daniel Boguslaw wrote up. It's called Between the Hammer and the Anvil, and I'd encourage everybody to read this full piece behind the New York Times October 7th expose. Let's start here. Anat Schwartz had a problem. The Israeli filmmaker and former Air Force intelligence official had been assigned by the New York Times to work with her nephew, Adam Sella, and veteran Times reporter Jeffrey Gettleman on an investigation into sexual violence by Hamas on October 7th that could reshape the way the world understood Israel's ongoing war on the Gaza Strip. By November, global opposition was mounting against Israel's military campaign, which had already killed thousands of children, women, and the elderly. On her social media feed, which the Times has since said it's reviewing, Schwartz liked a tweet saying that Israel needed to, quote, turn the Strip into a slaughterhouse. Violate any norm on the way to victory, read the post. Those in front of us are human animals who do not hesitate to violate minimal rules. The New York Times, however, does not have rules. The New York Times, however, does have rules and norms. A bit of a Freudian slip by me there. Schwartz had no prior reporting experience. Her reporting partner Gettleman explained the basics to her, Schwartz said in a podcast interview on January 3rd, produced by Israel's Channel 12 and conducted in Hebrew. Gettleman said, she said, was concerned that they get at least two sources for every detail we put into the article, cross-check information, do we have forensic evidence, blah, blah, blah. She says, they were basically, Gettleman was directing her to find evidence that could be corroborated, that was strong. We'll get into why it's not strong whatsoever. But the reporter was directing her from afar, and this person who had zero reporting experience was doing the digging on the ground in Israel. Scroll down a bit. Schwartz said she was initially reluctant to take the assignment because she did not want to look at visual images of potential assaults and because she lacked experience to conduct such an investigation. Nonetheless, she began working with Gettleman on the story, she explained in the podcast interview. Gettleman, a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, is an international correspondent, and when he is sent to a bureau, he works with news assistants and freelancers on stories. In this case, several newsroom sources familiar with the process said Schwartz and Sella did the vast majority of the ground reporting, while Gettleman focused on the framing and writing. The resulting report published in late December was headlined "Screams Without Words: How Hamas Weaponized Sexual Violence on October 7th." It was a bombshell and galvanized the Israeli war effort at a time when some of Israel's allies were expressing concern over the large-scale killing of civilians in Gaza. Inside the newsroom, the article was met with praise from from editorial leaders, but skepticism from other Times journalists. The paper's flagship podcast, The Daily, attempted to turn the article into an episode, but it didn't manage to get through a fact check, as The Intercept previously reported. The fear among Times staffers, who had been critical of the paper's Gaza coverage, is that Schwartz will become a scapegoat for what is a much deeper failure. She may harbor animosity towards Palestinians, lack the experience with investigative journalism, and feel conflicting pressures between being a supporter of Israel's war effort and a Times reporter, but Schwartz did not commission herself and her nephew to report one of the most consequential stories of the war. Senior leadership at the New York Times did. Now let's pause there for a second, Binder. And what's your reaction to this as a reporter? Because this is, first of all, the New York Times is the paper of record. It's like the pinnacle of what many journalists feel their career could be. To be able to get a front page story, to be a co-author, to write a piece on this war, on this major international crisis, and no veteran reporter, no reporter on staff seemingly, no reporter who toiled over this was hired to be the point people for Gettleman in this report. It was two Israelis who were related familially and had no reporting experience to do such a thing. It's like, honestly, it's embarrassing for the paper in terms of like the meritocratic elements, but then just the process is so shockingly shoddy.
Right. It's a combination of everything. Like, I don't think, on its own, not having reporting experience means you can't, do an act of journalism, of very good, well done journalism. There are people out there who experience things, citizen journalists who, aren't professionals, who still have something that they've seen or, have a firsthand account of that is certainly valid and reportable and legit. But it's just a combination of everything. It's like they specifically sought out someone who seemingly has a very clear bias. Again, on its own, not necessarily an issue, certainly something to be extra cautious about. But, still you can do good, legitimate, straightforward journalism and still have a personal bias on an issue. But clearly that's not what happened here. You have someone who went out to find facts, went out to find witness accounts, went out to find sources to corroborate what they were trying to find out and confirm, and they could not do that. They could not do that. And with the inability to do that, instead of deciding that there's a different story to tell or no story at all, they found what they could and seemingly misreported it, or at least contorted what was being said. And laid it out, like the angle in which they laid it out in wasn't just like, here is a compilation of, what is being said in Israeli media, etc., from people who were, there on October 7th, who, again, these aren't people who experienced it.
Yes.
These are people with specific claims based on their firsthand, what they say is their firsthand account. They witnessed it, but then there are also, seemingly based on this Intercept report, holes in every single story which they pulled. Like there's
it's crazy,
right? Yeah, like every single third party that they quoted in this story, which again, the angle here, the way this story was promoted, the way this story was sold, is that this is it, the defining proof that this happened on October 7th, that there was systemic rape perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th. And there is that package that the story was sold as, that claim is not confirmed. It's just not. There are stories from people who were there on October 7th who say they saw this happen. And then when they tell it different times, it almost, I believe every single instance.
I want to get to those details.
Their story changes every single time they tell it.
And the people who they get the information from are proven liars as well. Like, let's because you're hitting on so much of it. Like, the details in this are just shocking. Let's scroll to that part that Binder is referencing, where they begin to go through how she got her sourcing. But this is how, briefly, I'll read this section. In response to The Intercept's questions about Schwartz's podcast interview, a spokesperson for the New York Times walked back the Blockbuster's article's framing that evidence shows Hamas had weaponized sexual violence to a softer claim that there may have been systemic use of sexual assault. May have. You guys did a front page report. A front page report on this. This is not just a statement to The Intercept. They need to do a full correction in the paper. 100%. This is not sufficient.
It's absolutely fair to say we can't prove this did or did not happen.
Right.
These are what people who were there are saying. This is also what they're saying every time they tell the story. It's possible that they witnessed this. It's possible they witnessed versions of this. It's possible they did not witness it, or, like in the, in everything that was going on the ground on October 7th. They could have misconstrued something. They could, they've experienced the trauma. I'm sure things happen. You can't prove otherwise, though, that this did or did not happen. Yet New York Times, instead of doing a report, maybe that this is everything we know, and then present everything that we just mentioned here. No, instead they framed it as this is the definitive proof that this did 100% happen in this way. And that definitive proof does not exist. Even in the article itself, that definitive proof, no matter how much they tried to angle it that way, no matter how much the reporters' writing tried to, contort the story in that way, even when they had to get down to the facts, they do not have a first-hand account. They do not have anything from someone who says, this happened to me. And they go around saying, why they could not have that, which is fine. That's totally legit to write that too. But then again, you do not have that definitive proof that the whole story was angled on. It's just there was,
and then it wouldn't be a front page story, and it wouldn't maybe even be the thrust of the story. It would be it would be in the 4th or 5th paragraph in another piece. Some secondhand claims of sexual assault have been made, but the New York Times could not independently verify it with a first-person account. Instead, it was a front-page headline story, extremely sensationalist. So this is where the evidence falls apart. Scroll down, Bradley. You'll see a photo, and this is where the beginning of the Intercept, point-by-point breakdown.
And I just want to add here, if anyone is listening to this and they're like, oh, this left-wing show or whatever, blah, 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 they come across this, they're not a regular viewer or whatever, we are saying exactly what journalists with the New York Times' podcast, their main podcast, their bread and butter, their headline podcast, The Daily. They couldn't run a story on this because the journalists in that department at the New York Times, their own fact-checking process, which apparently is more rigorous than the one that the actual report had to go through itself, they could not. They couldn't run it because they said there was too many holes in the story. What the story was claiming was not there, so they did not run a story on this in The Daily.
That would be interesting to know who's the editor for The Daily versus who's the editor for the front page, and what are their differences and who do they answer to, because my guess is this comes from the top of the paper, because these kinds of decisions, this would not pass standard scrutiny anywhere else, any other major paper like this. But Schwartz began her work on the violence of October 7th, where one would expect, by calling around to the designated Room 4 facilities in 11 Israeli hospitals that examine and treat potential victims of sexual violence, including rape. First thing, I called them all, and they told me no complaint of sexual assault was received, she recalled in the podcast interview. I had a lot of interviews which didn't lead anywhere. I would go to all kinds of psychiatric hospitals, sit in front of the staff, and all of them are fully committed to the mission, and no one had met a victim of sexual assault. The next step was to call the manager of the sexual assault hotline in Israel's south, which proved equally fruitless. The manager told her they had no reports of sexual violence. She described the call as a crazy in-depth conversation where she pressed for specific cases. Did anyone call you? Did you hear anything? She recalled asking. How could it be that you didn't? So let me pause here for a second. This is already so many red flags here, Binder. This is a reporter in search of an already predetermined idea of what the story should be. She's fishing. She's fishing.
She's not following the facts. She's following preconceived notion, what her story to be. And then she sought out whoever would tell her what she wanted to hear, basically.
And that makes sense because she has no journalistic training. This is not something that a journalist would do if this were actually somebody who had reporting in their background.
And seemingly where she did find what she was looking for, it all comes from, or the majority of it comes from secondhand as well.
Yes.
Like that's the thing. That's the extra thing on top of this all. Like it's not like she herself found dozens or even a half dozen people who were maybe at the music festival that was attacked on October 7th and sat down and spoke with each and every one of them. A lot of what she's reporting is secondhand through another media source or outlet. Some of it, from what I've seen, maybe even the majority of it, but I do know some of it. I would have to check the piece myself. But some of it I recall was biased in and of itself because they were from
I'm about to get to it.
Conducted interviews and stuff.
I'm about to get to it here.
State-funded media, it's like
an ultra-Orthodox group. Yeah, I just want to lay this out because, it is as insane as you say. Bradley, can we put this back up? As Schwartz began her own efforts to find evidence of sexual assault, the first specific allegations of rape began to emerge. A person identified in anonymous media interviews as a paramedic from the Israeli Air Force Medical Unit 669 claimed he saw evidence that 2 teenage girls at Kibbutz Nahal Oz had been raped and murdered in their bedroom. The man made other outrageous claims, however, that called his report into question. He claimed another rescuer pulled out of the garbage a baby who'd been stabbed multiple times. He also said he had seen Arabic sentences that were written on entrances to houses with the blood of the people that were living in the houses. No such messages exist, and the story of the baby in the trash can has been debunked. The bigger problem was that no 2 girls at the kibbutz fit the source's description. In further interviews, he changed the location to Kibbutz Be'eri, but no victims killed there matched the description either, as Mondoweiss reported. And then she doesn't seem to think this is questionable in any way. After seeing these interviews, Schwartz started calling people at Kibbutz Be'eri and other kibbutzim that were targeted on October 7th in an effort to track down the story. Nothing. There was nothing, she said. No one saw or heard anything. She then reached the Unit 669 paramedic who relayed to Schwartz the same story he had told other media outlets, which she says convinced her there was a systemic nature to the sexual violence. I said, okay, so it happened. One person saw it happen in Be'eri, so it can't just be one person because it's 2 girls. It's sisters. It's in the room. Something about this is systemic. Something about this feels to me that it's not random, Schwartz concluded on the podcast. Schwartz said she then began a series of extensive conversations with Israeli officials from Zaka, which has been proven to be, this is now me saying this, a lying organization time and time again. A private ultra-Orthodox rescue organization that has been documented to have mishandled evidence, including mishandled evidence and spread multiple false stories about the events of October 7th, including debunked allegations of Hamas operatives beheading babies and cutting the fetus from a pregnant woman's body. Its workers are not trained forensic scientists or crime scene experts. When we go into a house, we use our imagination, said Yossi Landau, a senior Zaka official describing the group's work at the October 7th attack sites. The bodies were telling us what happened. That's what happened. Landau is featured in the Times report, though no mention is made of his well-documented track record of disseminating sensational stories of atrocities that were later proven false. Schwartz said that in her initial interview, Zaka members did not make specific allegations of rape, but described the general conditions of the bodies they saw. They told me, yes, we saw naked women, or we saw a woman without underwear, both naked without underwear and tied with zip ties, and sometimes not zip ties, sometimes a rope or a string of a hoodie. Schwartz continued to look for evidence at various sites of attack and found no witnesses to corroborate stories of rape. And so I searched a lot of the kibbutzim, and apart from this testimony of the Israeli military paramedic, and additionally here and there, Zaka people, the stories like didn't emerge from there, she said. Okay, so here we go.
There's so much here. Like, first of all, she admits in this interview, like this also just shows like this is someone who has no idea what they're doing. That she went out there in a interview that was going to be published. Did she think because it was in Hebrew that no one outside of Israel would come across it? Or, I mean, that's a possibility. Or
I mean, they do this all the time. Just briefly, Binder, like the Israeli officials say their most genocidal stuff in Hebrew because they literally bank on the fact that English outlets won't necessarily pick up on it.
Right, but this is something a little bit different, though. This is someone who put their work in an English. The work that she's talking about and the work that's being criticized is in it. The world's largest current events English speaking outlet. And she's either A, like you said, just thinks it's fair game because she's speaking to an Israeli outlet in Hebrew, or B, she just fundamentally doesn't know that everything she just said calls into question everything she's done, her entire body of work here. The idea that she would just assume. Look, first of all, the assumption is, let's just take that one example she gave of like the two sisters or whatever, right? She said that she had heard secondhand that one of them was assaulted or sexually assaulted. And then that means that the other sister had to have been assaulted too.
They did not match the description of anybody at both of the kibbutzim that it was said to have taken place at, and the guy that said that changed his story twice.
Right. This is just not how it's done. It's just not how it's done. You don't just assume things. And then, of course, there's that other that conservative group. What was it? Zaka, you said?
Yes.
I remember them. They were the ones early on who were giving credence to the beheaded babies myth that we know is not true.
Were the group that was seemingly complicit in not being forthright about the bodies post October 7th of the Israelis that were killed, and did not immediately hand them over basically to investigators so that they could look into potentially how these folks died.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they admit that they just look at the scene and then they imagine what could have happened without any sort of forensic proof, without any sort of actual investigation. They just decide whatever they'd like to decide. And I mean, if you don't understand what the problem is with that, in terms of creating manufacturing consent around, look at these horrendous things that these people did, we have to respond in kind, then I mean, I don't know what to say to you. Like, and also there's obviously a huge difference here between what's in that report and what we know for sure. Again, is it possible that we know people were killed? That's horrific in its own. No one wants anyone to die, obviously, but you have to understand that the Israeli media and Israeli military and the Israeli government have used these specific gruesome stories, which are not confirmed, and as we know now, at least partially invented based on a conservative group's imagination, to say that we have to do certain things a certain way. It's inconceivable that this would be printed in the New York Times, or that they wouldn't. They're standing behind her. They're standing by her. They put out a response. They're standing by her reporting.
Are they really? Because she's under investigation. When did they put this out?
She tweeted it out today. A screenshot from their statement. They're standing by her.
Are you? Because I thought they were just going to scapegoat her, and then we don't look at the top.
No,
Binder.
they're saying the issue was her Twitter likes, not the reporting itself.
That is astounding. I mean, this is clear. We've got to look at the ownership of the Times at this point and what influence that they're exerting. We talk about the clear influence of the Murdochs. Here we go, on the Wall Street Journal. But this is like that, related to Israel. I am thankful to the New York Times for standing behind the important stories that we've published. The Times didn't just stand behind me, but also behind the many women whose stories need to be told. How about Palestinian women?
Wait, but hold on though. She didn't tell the many women stories.
Yes.
Because she didn't speak to the many women who supposedly are involved in these stories. She is telling accounts she is not telling those women's stories. She's just not. She's just not. In fact, in that Intercept article, one of the families of one of the women supposedly who was assaulted and then killed, they're saying, based on the text messages they received, they think it is impossible from her when she was still alive. They think it was impossible for her to have gone through what the New York Times is claiming she did.
Yep. Yes.
This is from the family of the actual woman herself. So talk about telling these women stories. They're not even respecting the family's recollection of what their own flesh and blood went through.
That's exactly right. They've been trying to sound the alarm on this as well, in the same way that the hostages' families are being entirely stifled within Israeli society. The families of these victims are also being silenced. And the New York Times in the United States is complicit in this. It just is incredible that they have, I mean, I don't know. This is a massive scandal. This is Judith Miller level, like, propaganda from, the Iraq War, laundering the weapons of mass destruction stuff. But maybe even worse, given how insanely shoddy the reporting is, and the fact that this is the conclusion seemingly of their investigation.
No, it's certainly that's certainly correct, and I think that's actually a depressing comparison, because we do look at Judith Miller in the New York Times and the promotion of the war in Iraq and the weapons of mass destruction and all that. We look at that now as for what it was. We teach it in history classes and journalism school as everything that was wrong. Yet to this day, still there was no accountability. Judith Miller never faced any career issues with she never faced any accountability.
She got hired by Fox News.
Right. So I mean, it's depressing, because that's an absolutely right comparison. We will look back at this moment, and it will be something that is correctly remembered for all its wrongheadedness, I guess you can say, years from now in the history books. Yet everyone involved will continue on. In fact, they'll probably only fail up and continue to get even higher paid, even more influential, cushier jobs.
Yeah, and Gettleman has won a Pulitzer. So, this is the kind of reporting that gets rewarded. The guy that took these folks and perhaps was instrumental, we don't know, in getting them to be those on the ground that were giving him the information for the piece. And I just also,
you mentioned earlier, I think, this is more of like a journalist career type thing than like a part of the news story here. But I do think it shows that, I think the younger people who are interested in journalism and news, they will no longer look at the New York Times as the goal, like the standard bearer. Like, I remember when I broke into journalism, I had an editor who would constantly, bring up whenever they would edit something or try to teach me something, the point being would always be that, if your end goal is working somewhere respectable like the New York Times, then, and I would say to them, I don't actually have that as my end goal. I have no career goal in terms of working at the New York Times or any of those big legacy media organizations. In fact, my goal is to somehow one day make a full-time living doing this completely independently.
Right.
I do not want to be beholden to an organization like that. And that was based on my own personal feelings on, for example, the New York Times, partially, like you just mentioned, or for one of the reasons, like you mentioned just earlier, their promotion and of the war in Iraq. And, I think this is going to be a moment like that again. And, with the current state of media, it's going to be rough, because these legacy organizations like the Washington Post and the New York Times, they're growing unlike pretty much any other moneyed media outlet out there.
Yep. Everything else is shutting down. And I want to say the Washington Post has actually done, Evan Hill.
They've been. I was just using them as a
Lovejoy. They've been. Yeah. Just wanted to give them credit. They've been so much better than the New York Times on Gaza and Israel.
New York Times has good reporters too. Like I think I think the best way to go about media nowadays is not to look towards a respected outlet. It's to find a specific or multiple specific journalists that you trust and do solid reporting regardless of wherever they are working or publishing, because they wouldn't put their name on garbage regardless of where it is. So that's what I recommend. Like, don't trust an outlet based on the outlet. Trust the story based on who's behind it and their body of work.
Lydia Rose writes in 1922, the Times published its first article about Hitler and downplayed his anti-Semitism, saying it was only to appeal to anti-Semites in Germany. That's a good little tidbit there, Lydia Rose. And let me just end this by saying, as a woman, pulling out that card right now, whoa, watch out, folks. I actually deeply resent this racist usage of sexual violence in order to further dehumanize Palestinians and justify the genocide that's ongoing right now. It is not done in the reverse, even though there have been actually credible reports of sexual violence of women and girls in Israeli custody that have trickled out. But again, journalists have either had to leave Gaza or have been killed for the most part. There are still a few left. But there's no way, and this is on purpose by the Israelis, to verify certain information coming in there and coming out of there because of the fact that they control their borders, land and sea, and they've killed so many people that it's also why the death tolls can't be verified, and they have to come from these outlets will call it, to give a nod to the Israeli lobby, the Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry, which has been correct the entire time. They can't be independently verified because all the journalists have been killed or had been forced to leave because they would die if they stayed. So, there have been reports of sexual violence against Palestinian women and girls, but that gets no coverage. Why? Because what the design of this piece was to further dehumanize Palestinians and Hamas, which the Israeli government and Zionists conflate with Palestinians, to paint them as savages, as rapists, as violent, anti-woman, anti-gay, anti-cosmopolitan, anti-Western savages, which is a trope deployed against Arabs and Muslims and has been for my entire life. This is the exact continuation of that kind of dehumanization that we saw the New York Times enable during the Iraq War, and they're continuing to enable it for the Zionist colonial project that is Israel. So, please, the idea that they're using the Me Too movement and the increased anxiety around sexual assault to further justify this indiscriminate bombing is peak kind of capitalist feminism at work, and exactly why we have to oppose it and make sure that feminism, as are all other societal lenses, that it's intersectional and put in context of who gets privileged and who gets humanized in the Western press and who does not. with that, I mean, fun half stuff here, Binder, right? But great job breaking that down with me because I thought it was super important, to be honest.
Yeah, it's great reporting from Intercept that they found that. And,
I know.
One thing that struck me actually, and I don't remember if I there's been so much that's happened in these past few months. I don't recall if I did read this and just simply, I overlooked it or forgot about it, or if it's something I just didn't see at all. But early on in that piece, they have this point made about how in the New York Times, they had a long-standing, rule where they didn't refer to Hamas as a terrorist organization because it wasn't a stateless actor. It's actually, the official government of Gaza. And then after October 7th, they actually, I don't know if they forced him out or he felt like he needed to resign because of changes going on. But the person who was standing by that rule, they no longer had that position, and they changed that rule to, that guideline to no longer refer to them as, how they've done so. And I mean, listen, for as long as I've been following this, which has been a while now, way before October 7th, obviously, years and years and years, there was that fundamental difference between Hamas and what we perceived as terrorist organizations in the Middle East in general. Like, because Hamas is a state actor, it is the government of the region. There are, parts of Hamas that we would look at like other governments. There are legitimate like lawmakers and politicians and, things like that. And then there was this more militant area of part of Hamas, which people would then, use to paint the whole group as a terrorist organization. There was that fundamental difference, and that wasn't just from, a far left or whatever. That was something that the U.S. government even viewed, and the Israeli government even viewed as the fundamental difference because they worked, had contacts with Hamas that they would work with.
Yeah. Well, we all know that too, that Netanyahu was instrumental in allowing Hamas to be funded because he saw Hamas as an asset as opposed to, the more secular parties in Palestine, because he could demonize them as a terrorist organization and continue to justify killing them. So, yeah, that's exactly right. All right, let's take a call really quickly. Calling from a 928 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is, let me take it off speaker.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry, I had the speaker on because I was in my car driving home.
No, but you knew, I didn't even have to ask.
This is Carl from the Arizona Tri-State.
Carl from Arizona. What's on your mind?
Something fitting for the fun haft. It's something I noticed that I think Sam and Matt missed yesterday in the Joe Rogan clip with Dr. Phil.
Mm-hmm.
Right towards the end of their clip, one of the things that they talked about was they said was that people aren't going back to work, and then they said they're taking up lazy lady jobs, which means they're specifically doing the Tim. Yeah, lazy girl jobs. They're specifically like doing the Tim Pool thing of saying that women are quitting work to become like OnlyFans models and stuff.
Yeah. They're not like down in like the coal mines that are podcasting,
Exactly.
Well,
so that was just something interesting that I noticed yesterday.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Go ahead, Binder.
The obsession with OnlyFans from certain people is quite interesting because it bothers them that it's an area where women basically are the money makers there. Or if you're a guy and you want to make money on there, I'm sorry, and this is another part that bothers them, and you want to be successful, your audience isn't going to be women. Your audience is going to be other men. So you either are a woman who is able to make a good source of income from OnlyFans, or you are a man who has to appeal to gay men to make a good source of income from OnlyFans. And that's really the crux of what bothers them. It's not if you're a straight man who doesn't want gay people looking at your content, then you're not going to find much of an audience on OnlyFans.
That's true. That's true.
But even on top of that, though, even with all that said, even of the women and men on OnlyFans who do make a decent income, they're like of the 0.1% of people on OnlyFans. Most people on OnlyFans don't make all that much money. Some people, it's like a side gig for them. If even that, I've read there are people who just do it for fun and get like beer money. Like it's not even enough to be considered like a side project or a side gig.
Or like that story of that one teacher who was doing it for a side hustle and then got fired the second anybody found out.
Yes,
yeah, I think it is really
too.
I think it is really gross that that we police people, what they do on their spare time. There's nothing to do with their, it doesn't affect their job, their full-time main job at all. And on top of that, those full-time main jobs don't pay them enough that they don't have to do other stuff. Like the nerve of like the world we live in, like the employers, the nerve of these people to say like, oh, we're going to pay you like $50K as a mother, a teacher who is a mother or father of 2 kids in the city, in a city where it's the cost of living is expensive. We're going to only pay you $50K, if even that. And on top of that, we're going to police what you can do in your spare time that can make that you do to make extra money to make up for our lack of paying you enough. Like it is gross. I'm sorry.
It really is.
That really pisses me off when that happens.
Appreciate the call, Carl. Real quick.
One more aspect of that is also when I first heard that, my brain, because I know a couple of them on Twitter, the people in that type of industry, and I'm like, the amount of work that they have to do to keep up their appearance would make you sweat, you old fat fellow.
He's already sweating from all the like meat and freaking like, whatever the supplements coursing through his veins. But appreciate the call, Carl. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Emma. Thanks, Matt. And
sorry.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Carl. JR and Philly, Joe Rogan and
Emma
Dr.
heard
Phil.
that he was about to say something nice about me, and she was like, I got to hang up.
I know. This is only praise for me on this program. JR and Philly says Joe Rogan and Dr. Phil are echoing the manosphere assholes on Tim Pool who say that women are born with $1 million in their pocket, presumably because they can objectify themselves with OnlyFans or have men take care of them. The misogyny is just wild.
Again, it is so funny that that's the thing. Like, again, like I said, OnlyFans, that's like, that's because the women on OnlyFans who make a lot of money are actually doing the full-fledged, like they're showing everything, or they're already famous from something else.
Right.
And they basically are able to basically use that as a jump off to make money on OnlyFans, which requires them to do, a lot of work on whatever other career they did to get to that fame level to begin with. But when it comes to like that thing, like in general, in life, they're able to. That time and time again, that's shown to be bullshit. Like, again, unless you're dealing with like actual adult entertainment, which is like the one industry where women are making more money, because obviously that's what people are paying for. Like, you always hear like men complain about, oh, these women Twitch streamers make so much money. It's so easy for them. But if you look at the top paid streamers on Twitch, it's all men. It's all men. Even though you think that the top, grossing streamers are all women because it's just so easy for them. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not.
Also, if it's so easy, bro, like, and if you want to do it so badly, because you're already famous, Tim Pool, Joe Rogan, if you wanted to jerk off on OnlyFans, you could actually make a lot of money. You could parlay your podcasting into showing everybody you jerking off. So, like,
right, that's a
get
great
to
point.
it.
They're famous. They're known by for the industry they're in, and just like you see actresses or a big thing now is pro wrestlers when they leave the WWE and they no longer have those like rules they have to abide to. They can't do that stuff. They take their wrestling fan base over to OnlyFans, and they make tons of money being able to do that. You guys are famous.
Chop.
Go over there, show a little skin. It'll be easy peasy for you.
Chop. I mean, people might vomit, and you might send some people to the hospital showing all of that on camera, Tim Pool. But like at the same time, you'll be making bank.
No, I mean, listen, I'm not going to king shame. There's probably someone out there who wants to see that little hoodie on that little head of his.
What little hoodie? Which little hoodie are we talking about?
Excuse me, little. What's the hat called? Beanie. That's what I meant to say.
Beanie, but you were thinking of another hoodie, and we don't need to talk about that. All right, let's quickly. I know that I'm Gaza obsessed, but this this I loved this footage from the EU here. So this is Abir al-Salani. She's a member of the European Parliament, and she represents Sweden. And she went to the podium, basically to protest the continued, obviously, support of the genocide in Gaza. And she begins by not speaking at all. And then when she does speak, I thought her words were incredibly poignant.
Do you want to use your time, speaking time? So if not, I kindly ask you to leave the podium so that the next speaker can intervene.
There are no more words to speak about what's going on in Gaza, Mr. President of this session. There are no more laws to break. There are no more appeals that we can do to what's going on. The hypocrisy is obvious. Our collective humane has failed. We said that we won't fail, but we're failing again. Human rights have a skin color, and the darker you are, the less human rights you have. We have been tried to be silenced. They have tried to make us look like anti-Semites. They have tried to make us look like we don't care about the safety of the Israeli people. All of that still to make it possible to kill more Palestinians, unfortunately. Thank you.
I just found her act of protest there holding up a bloody hand, as people may remember. At the very beginning, really, of Israel's assault, Tony Blinken was called in front of Congress, and there were protesters behind him holding up bloody hands themselves in the background, basically to demonstrate his complicity. And Abir al-Salani, that is her speaking as in the European Parliament, which is the basically the legislative body in the EU there. And beginning with by protesting in that way, but also making the point where we talk about human rights, and the Biden administration talked about returning to a rules-based international order, and that includes like international law and the respect of human rights in theory. But in the post-World War II landscape, the construction of what constitutes human rights, that has been determined by the West. And we've made very subjective, racist choices about who is worthy of human rights and who is not. And it's, by the way, as stark as can be in the way that our media and our political figures speak about Ukraine and Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and what Ukrainian people are dealing with on a daily basis in their own country, and how our leaders responded with weapons, with basically universal support until Republican opposition, because of like Trump being pro-Putin or whatever, and now they're doing this austerity thing, like that. Because of that, that's when things began to break. But Jon Stewart played it in his segment, which I didn't love fully, but had some good moments on Gaza, where he played like Blinken and John Kirby speaking so solemnly about what Ukrainian people are going through. And then at the end, he revealed that that's what it was, but framed it at the beginning as if he was talking about Palestinians. And it truly is fundamentally racism. That's what this is about. And younger generations see supporting Palestine as a racial justice issue and an anti-colonial project, which is exactly what it is. All right. One more. We'll do another clip here then too.
Have we done a clip yet? We haven't, have we?
That was
that
first.
That was the clip. Yes, but other than that, I don't think we've done a clip before that.
How about this? Here is ADL President Jonathan Greenblatt. Bender, you'll remember him fondly.
I saw this. Yes. Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, you'll remember him fondly as the guy who really was critical of Elon Musk tweeting out support for the Great Replacement Theory, which is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that says that basically Jews are pushing migrants into the United States as the puppet masters to change the demography of the United States. To what end? Who knows? The conspiracy theorists on the right just don't think highly enough of Black people, of Latino people, of migrants to think that they could have their own agency and reasons for coming into the United States. So it has to be the all evil Jews, of course, pulling the strings. So Elon Musk had tweeted in response to something about that, like, you know, very interesting, or I agree. I forget what it was, Bender. What?
Yeah, he basically said it is this or something like that. Yes, he endorsed it.
Right, he endorsed it. And then, so Jonathan Greenblatt of the Anti-Defamation League, which is a pro-Zionist group in the United States, condemned him. Then within a few days, Elon Musk was in Israel as they ramped up their genocide in Gaza, solemnly touring around, and Jonathan Greenblatt completely said, oh, I believe him, reverse course. And then surprisingly, or not so much, I kept seeing ads for the state of Israel all over Twitter. Like, there was clearly some sort of partnership with Twitter and Israel with advertising. And is it a little dystopian that a foreign country can just advertise just to cover PR-wise for their genocide? Yes. And Elon was complicit in that to cover up for his own anti-Semitism.
And you'll recall Greenblatt, prior to Elon purchasing Twitter in 2022, referred to him as the Henry Ford of our time.
Yes,
which I
his
think,
anti-Semitism,
which I think was a little bit more prescient than Greenblatt anticipated when he said it initially.
Yes,
but I also think
he received a lot of blowback even from within his own organization.
Yeah, he probably was like, "Hey, John." Anyone remember what Henry Ford was also known for other than the cars?
But he received blowback from that, and then blowback from when Elon announced he was going to police pro-Palestine language on X, Twitter. And this was just after Elon endorsed that anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. And Greenblatt comes out and goes, thank you so much, Musk, for this. And he received blowback within his own organization for how quickly that turnaround was. And all it took was for Elon to say he was going to censor Palestinian voices.
Yep. All you need to do, I've been trying to get this PR advice to Kanye, but it's not getting through. For people to forget all like the pro-Hitler stuff and all the anti-Semitism, just tweet out, I stand with Israel, and everything's fine, bro. But with all of that,
Kanye actually basically did that. You don't know if you saw that TMZ thing.
I did see. He declined to comment, but you've got to go further. You've got to be pro-Israel, Kanye.
I got to say, though, pretty amazing for the guy who was on that trajectory he was. And then when it came to being asked about Palestine, he was like, I don't know enough about that one. Sorry.
It's kind of in keeping because he's just actually anti-Semitic. So this is Jonathan Greenblatt, that guy, the ADL's Jonathan Greenblatt. He was asked on CNBC by Andrew Ross Sorkin, who has some great moments, honestly, as an interviewer, I think, about the uncommitted effort in Michigan, where over 100,000 voters on the Democratic side in Michigan said, we're going to leverage our vote to force Biden to change course on this genocide. And this is how Greenblatt responded.
What happened in Michigan? Meaning the people voting uncommit. I don't know. Yeah. I'm old enough to remember when you were upset about policies that a government was doing or that your political party was doing, you actually got involved. You didn't pull back. You said, I want a seat at the table and I'm going to earn it and then demand. I think what's happening is ridiculous. How's that going to help economic opportunity for the people of Michigan? How's that going to help make that state better? How's that going to help the Democratic Party win?
People who just voted.
I think these people voting uncommitted, I think it's pathetic. And if they really want to make a difference, they should roll up their sleeves and get involved. But you know what, Andrew? I hope they like what the other guy will do. I'm sure he'll listen to them. You know, I mean, it's absurd.
The institution.
That's literally what they did. That's what they did. They actually, it was one of the more beautiful examples of democracy at work that I've seen in some time in this country. It was a not well-funded campaign to organize with Arab Americans, people of conscience, young people in the state of Michigan to use their collective power to vote uncommitted to force Biden to change course. It was as acute of an example of political engagement that I can remember, and he's literally equating it with them sitting on the couch in November. Bro, no one can spin this in that way because this is the primary. This is the exact moment when you do this kind of thing. This is not them not being engaged. It's, in fact, the opposite, but it's fun to see him squirm in that way because the movement in the United States, the anti-war, anti-genocide movement, is growing by the day.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything you just said, obviously, but also, I mean, if they had done something, if they had gotten involved, they would have used that against in some other way, like he's suggesting. They would use that against them too. Like if there was like a Palestinian lobby that was moneyed, that put forth like actual donations to politicians in exchange for policy, you would go out and call that act buying. No, they're buying up politicians. It's anti-Semitism. There'd be something leveled against them, like we've seen in every single case in turn. We police how the pro-Palestinian movement protests. We police the language the pro-Palestinian movement uses beyond anything I've ever seen any other movement go through. Like basic words are considered to be uncouth or straight up anti-Semitic. Not even like, we're not even talking about slurs, which obviously not cool, not good. We don't endorse that, but that's not what we're even talking about. It's such a,
it's also activism by many Jewish Americans too. That's what's so beautiful about it. It's multicultural and multiracial.
Right. And when CNBC is the one it's going, but they voted, they took part in the process, and you're the one. I don't even know if it hit him. Like it seems like it goes right over his head, or he just ignores it purposefully.
Yeah,
because it makes him look dumb. Like it really makes him look bad. He comes out looking horrible, honestly.
Last clip here. I wanted to get to this today. This Tim Kaine one. So, Tim Kaine, people may not realize that Tim Kaine is shockingly decent on Israel, like for the Senate standards and for what you might expect of the guy that was selected to be Hillary Clinton's vice president. I mean, he did not attend Netanyahu's speech where Netanyahu worked with Republicans to circumvent Obama back in the day and spoke directly to Congress. And there were some members of Congress that did not attend in protest. Tim Kaine was one of those folks in the Senate. And, he is on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's in Virginia he's the senator from Virginia. So he's quite close to like the defense industry, our Defense Department, Washington, D.C., the blob, right? Like Maryland and Virginia. Those are the states in the DC metro area where there's a lot of like that industry infrastructure. And so that is the context of this, like of his politics, honestly. And I think that's what makes his stance here pretty admirable, and the fact that he chose to call out the Biden administration like this important as we begin to ramp up the pressure on the Biden administration to end support for Israel right now, because the United States has been shooting at the Houthis, has been shooting at Houthi targets and in Yemen as well, in response to the fact that Houthis and other groups are blocking ships, commercial ships, and sometimes attacking them. in the Red Sea trying to disrupt trade in order to show support for Palestinians and put pressure on the West to end their support of this genocide. I think it's quite straightforward. They've said that that's their intention, and they did drastically reduce their attacks during the temporary ceasefire, and they had said that they will do that if there is a ceasefire. So, like, maybe we could try that instead of bombing them all the time. And that was kind of the logic that Tim Kaine arrived at as well.
Chairman.
Senator Kaine. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. Houthi behavior is abhorrent, but I've got to admit, I have grave skepticism about what we are doing right now. I have grave skepticism about the legal authorities. I have grave skepticism about the absence of true shared responsibility with nations whose ships are being attacked by the Houthis. Why should the U.S. and the U.K. be shouldering the burden of protecting other nations' ships? And I have serious skepticism about the effectiveness of this operation in terms of de-escalating either the attacks in the Red Sea. To begin with, on legal authority, I think we've all conceded that there is no congressional authorization for these hostilities. The hostilities definition under the War Powers Resolution has clearly been met when we're talking about 200 attacks on Houthis. We're losing troops, they're losing civilian casualties and others. This is hostilities. There's no congressional authorization for them. To claim that this is covered by Article 2 self-defense, Article 2 self-defense means you can defend U.S. personnel, you can defend U.S. military assets, you probably can defend U.S. commercial ships. But the defense of other nations' commercial ships in no way, and it's not even close, that's not self-defense under Article 2 of the Constitution. And a president can't make it self-defense by calling another nation a partner. If you're defending the commercial ships of other nations, it is, in my view, laughable to call that self-defense. And so a narrow mission to defend U.S. shipping, both military and commercial, that is Article 2 self-defense. But broader efforts to defend commercial ships of other nations, while it might be strategically a good idea, there's no constitutional authorization that would allow a president to do that unilateral. And second, taking offensive action and striking targets within Yemen to degrade Yemeni capacity, Houthi capacity, while again it might be strategically a smart thing to do, that's not self-defense under Article 2. And so I basically view this at the first level as a set of actions that might have a strategic value, although we've yet to see a strategy.
Yep.
Senator Young and Senator Murphy and I wrote a letter to the administration asking many of these questions on January 23rd, and we don't have a response. But there may be a strategic wisdom in doing it, but I think the activities are far beyond what a president's unilateral power would be. That's number one. Number two, shared responsibility. Commercial shipping in the Red Sea involves ships from many, many nations. And although there are partners in this operation, the military actions are being undertaken by the United States and the UK. Why should the United States and UK be shouldering the burden of this? There needs to be, if we can get to a point where we can actually authorize U.S. participation, we shouldn't do it without other nations participating. But finally, I guess my most serious skepticism right now is at the effectiveness of this. President Biden himself has said that the actions that we are undertaking are not likely to deter Houthi escalation. And I am a little disappointed that you so quickly try to pull cold water on the idea that this is connected to the war in Gaza. These attacks started, Secretary Shapiro, as you said, on November 19. The Houthis have said this is because of the war in Gaza. Now, you've pointed out instances of ships that weren't going to Israel or instances of ships that had food that were going to nations that needed food. But I think the most natural interpretation of this is the Houthis seeing some suffer in the region or saying others are going to suffer in the region until we figure out a response. And I would venture to suggest that about the only time we've seen something that was a de-escalation moment was in the week-plus-long pause in Gaza when the first hostage deal was done. And so trying to reestablish deterrence, I don't think you're going to do it if the 200 strikes become 400 strikes, 800 strikes, 1,200 strikes. I think you will reestablish deterrence when we get a hostage deal that leads us to a truce, that leads us to humanitarian aid into Gaza, that leads us to the ability to discuss whether whatever that truce period is can be extended. And so I hope you don't just pour cold water on the idea that, oh, this isn't really related to Gaza, because the timing of it was related to Gaza. They're saying it's related to Gaza, and the only period of de-escalation that we've seen was during the first hostage release. I'm going to continue to press on the legal authority questions, and I think many of us have these questions, and there's some difference of opinion, I think, on the committee about whether this U.S. strategy is going to involve de-escalation at all, or whether it's actually going to foment
more. I think he made his point there very well. So awesome job, Tim Kaine, because that, he calls the Houthi attacks abhorrent. I understand, we don't want any kind of escalation, but as he later lays out, they've made quite clear what their intentions are. It's because of the genocide in Gaza. That is why they are disrupting, as opposed to this like amorphous, terroristic notion. One of the hallmarks really of racism is like, we are rational actors. They are savages. They don't have the ability to make choices on the world stage in the way that we do. They're just attacking ships during this assault on Gaza for no reason, apparently. And to the legality of it, he's absolutely right. The War Powers Resolution says that the president must come to Congress if he is engaging in an armed conflict and an act of war. He cannot do so without Congress, and that has been made clear both by the Constitution and by the War Powers Resolution. And even under the authorization for the use of military force that was passed to give Bush these broader powers to fight the war on terror, that is, I wish the AUMF were repealed, and it was not something that should have happened at the time. But even under that law, it's not because of the reasons that he lays out there, because they are commercial ships, because they're often strikes that are hitting targets in Yemen in response to attacks on ships that are not even our own. You can't even claim this is defensive because of terrorism towards the United States. I think it's threadbare even if they're attacking or blockading United States commercial ships. But as Tim Kaine lays out there, this is not even in response to our ships on many occasions. These are for ships for other countries or other purposes. So it's really just about attacking Yemen and the Houthis because they are disrupting the flow of commerce and capitalism. And that is not something that constitutes the defense of the United States under either the AUMF or the War Powers Resolution, which builds off of it in that way, or I would say cuts into it.
Gotta say, it's the first time I guess you can say that.
Don't sing
Tim Kaine has earned.
Don't sing it.
It's almost like he's in
the membrane. Tim Kaine in the membrane.
Oh God, I knew you were gonna sing it. I mean, that was pretty decent though, and it's just
was good. I mean, it's good to hear it from someone like him too, and I don't mean that like you said. I don't know if this is. I didn't know this about him, that he's been good on this issue, but I mean more generally, it's good to hear it from someone who's considered a sort of centrist Dem, like not some like progressive stalwart or something like that. And the idea that that the administration would just so brazenly lie about this, that even Tim Kaine would have to call them out on it is I think noteworthy for sure.
Yeah. Okay, I lied. This is just one more thing because I feel like we've only done the Gaza stuff. I apologize. You'll enjoy this, Binder. So this is a TPUSA thing. You may have seen this, Matt, but the Turning Points USA field representative Aubrey Savala had this tweet, and she is in Arizona, I guess, which is like where I think Turning Points USA is located and put most of their efforts in, and they funneled money into the Arizona governor's and Senate race, and they lost both. Like, none of this turning college kids into reactionary right wingers stuff is really working, and it's definitely not working in Turning Point USA's backyard in Arizona. So anyway, they're just paid for by like big right wing donors, and everyone's cashing in, even if the results are not showing. So Aubrey Savala, who works for Charlie Kirk's Turning Points USA, tweeted this out about the mail-in ballots that she received in the mail. So trying to make some case that like there's a lot of ballots out there and people are ballot harvesting and submitting all these fake votes in order to get Democrats elected. She says, Maricopa County at its finest. My first time ever voting in the presidential preference election, and I received not one but 2 mail-in ballots. Thank you, at Stephen Richer. And so she tags a Maricopa County recorder in her post, this guy, Stephen Richer, who's responsible for counting ballots. And he responds directly to her. Hi, Aubrey. Thanks for reaching out. You changed your voter registration on the last day of voter registration, February 20th, from your Chandler address to your new Tempe address, or Tempe. Because early ballots must go out on February 21st, your Chandler ballot was already sent to go out, and so it did. Then we sent out a new ballot to your Tempe address when we proceeded process your voter registration modification. That's why you had to redact out different lengths in the address, because they were sent to different addresses. You'll also notice that one of the packet codes ends in 01, the one to your old address, and one ends in 02, the one sent to your new address. As soon as the 02 one goes out, the 01 packet is dead, meaning even if you sent it back, it wouldn't be processed to signature verification and would not be opened. That's how we prevent people from voting twice. So just use the one with your new address ending in 02. That's the only one that will work. Hope this helps. Have a great evening. Happy voting. And you know what I really loved about that response, in addition to her just getting so embarrassed, was the usage of the passive-aggressive "hope this helps," which we've all gotten an email or sent an email that includes "hope this helps." But rarely has there been a more satisfying usage of that passive aggression than in this particular instance, where she really thought she got them. She really thought she did something there. And too bad. There, of course, is a process so the ballots are not counted twice. Thoughts?
It is, really funny to see that happen and play out in real time like that. I do wonder if she did that purposefully.
I don't think she thought he'd reply. Oh, we lost Bender. Or he's frozen at least.
Oh, I'm frozen?
Oh, you're back. You're back. You're back now. Sort of. Oh no, we lost Bender. No, he is.
I'm back. Am I back? All right, I don't know what happened there.
Keep going.
All right. So what I was saying was, I don't know if she knew what she was doing there or not. Wouldn't put it past her either way, honestly. But that's the thing here. Like, so much of this is either these conservatives purposefully deceiving their audience by creating a scenario purposefully that makes it look like something more is going on there, or the other option is that they are literally too dumb to know what's going on, which I don't know which one makes them look better or worse, honestly. I mean, and the response to that was great, because there was a whole bunch of people obviously mocking the TP, the Turning Point USA person, but also there was someone, that person who questioned, like, how do they know? How do you know not to count both of them? Did you? I'm sorry, I froze. Did you show that one? The response?
Yeah,
to that
no,
one?
we didn't show that one. How do you know not to count both of them?
Yeah, some other conservative activist tried to like poke holes in the guy's claim in the comment to his response, and he like completely owned them.
Bradley's
too.
going to try to find it. Yeah.
Okay. They might have deleted it. Who knows? But it was like the basic crux of it was like, okay, so like, how does the machine know that, you know, if someone was to send both of them back, not to count one? And the guy was like, well, it's easy. Once we print up the O2 one, the number 2 one, the system knows to automatically deactivate the paper that has the O1 on it. So if you were to again ask for another one, we would send you one out that said O3, and that would cancel out the O2 one, and the O1 one would have been previously canceled out when we sent out the O2 one. And it's like she really thought, this other person really thought she was onto something too. Like,
yeah,
these people are stupid and they wouldn't know what they're doing.
In the same way, the bank has a system. If you try to electronically deposit a check twice, the same check, you're not going to be able to do it because the system then creates some sort of block so that it can't happen because it's already registered that it's been processed. This is very simple computing.
Right. They believe that there is some huge conspiracy out there where all this encrypted data is flying all over the place, being sent everywhere to add votes here, add votes there. Anything's possible. They can do anything to steal an election. But then they ask, how does the machine know the difference between a paper that says number 1 on it and a paper that says number 2 on it? Explain that. Gotcha.
I mean, it does very much explain how they're so easily duped by like Mike Lindell adjacent pseudo mathematical speak where there's really just no coherent basis for any of it, but it sounds like it could happen. So this is what Binder was referring to here. At Stephen Richer. 1, what happens if someone returns 2 ballots in the same envelope? 2, is there a way to tell if the first ballot ends up in the second envelope other than the CD mark? Say someone moves in with the CD, but to another city legislative district or precinct. And he responds here, Stephen Richer, who knows his crap. It's a great question. Each ballot has a code that also lines up with the return envelope. We check to make sure the right ballot style comes back in the envelope. Believe it or not, some people will send their primary ballot in their primary ballot for a general election. So yes, you need to use both the new ballot and the new envelope if you moved, as you should suggest, into a new legislative district on the last day of voter registration. In the instructions, but also we're able to help identify which is the correct one on a one-to-one basis by phone or email if needed. So the Goldwater attorney.
This isn't even.
That's not the one you were talking about?
That's not even what I was talking about, but it was the same thing basically. But I didn't know he got multiple. They really tried to poke holes in this. Like they were onto something here. Like they thought of something that no one ever thought of before.
Really,
like it is amazing. It is
Those are
amazing. Like this is actually like a perfect example of like an instance where like the government actually was proactive and did something the right way when it comes to like this. Listen, we know that a lot of these government agencies at times, they're not always so on top of things when it comes to like you move somewhere and they need to send something to a new address instead of the old address. I've been there, you've been there, we've all been through some of that type of stuff. But the idea that you would move and they would then immediately send a ballot to your new address with, well, if you move to a new district, there's a whole new list of things you could potentially have to vote for that wouldn't be on the old ballot, and then things that you wouldn't vote for in the new district that would be on the old ballot, and that they're proactive enough to get you the correct ballot as soon as you moved. I think that's great. And if they didn't do that, these same people would be complaining, oh, I moved and they don't want me to vote because I bet this territory is like me voting will be like the final push over the edge to turn this district red, and they don't want me to vote. They're trying to stop me from voting. That would be the case too. Like it's a no-win here because they will complain about anything and everything and twist and contort it into some conspiracy against them.
Yeah, 100%. But keep operating in Arizona, Turning Points USA. It's almost like they're making a negative impact, and that's what I like to see.
Chilling to see a fella named Parker Jackson, whose Twitter bio is Goldwater Institute staff attorney in
Yep.
the Federalist Society.
Getting smacked.
Not good.
All right, guys. We won't have time for calls anymore. Any more calls today? I apologize. Turning off the phone lines. John Brown. As it turns out, it's very difficult to get a tribute into the core of Washington D.C. Instead, we're going to make a bunch of AI generated videos of Angel Bo Biden and purchase a commercial time slots in the D.C. area just for Morning Joe. Okay. This is one of our IMers who said that we should hang do some projectile of an AI Bo Biden going into the White House like a ghost to tell Joe to stop the genocide.
You know what? I think at this point we need to consider all options.
Unfortunately, it's distasteful but necessary.
I think that actually might be a scenario that works too, honestly.
Yep, maybe the only one.
Right.
Small D Democrat. Happy Leap Day, Emma. Remember, rhubarb red, eat away. Rhubarb green, don't eat them. Citing my least favorite 30 Rock episode. Leap Day,
I just
William.
wanted to say, I'm sorry. I just remembered. I wanted to bring this up when you played the Greenblatt clip, but I was having a issue with the computer then too, so I forgot to say it. But what was really interesting, I mean, this isn't just with that clip on its own, but it's something I've seen over and over again from a lot of liberals, honestly. And it's this idea that, oh, you're only hurting yourself or something if you protest Joe Biden, threaten to withhold your vote from Joe Biden, whatever. And it's just stunning to me that this is sort of like the idea that you would actually feel a certain way about something, be so principled about something that, you know what, you accept that it might hurt you. You're not thinking about yourself and your well-being number one. That's just so they can't even think of that. It's just beyond them. Right. It's just like the idea, because Greenblatt said something to the effect of like, how is voting uncommitted going to help you in Michigan? How is that going to get money into your community or whatever? Well, I mean, the people in Michigan see their family members or people who they feel a connection to, people who are just like them. And not even just that, people who aren't Middle Eastern or Arab, who see what's going on there and feel compelled as human beings to act a certain way, that they're saying, you know what, maybe as punishment, money won't be sent to our district from the federal government but you know what, it's worth it for this. I mean, it's just so beyond them. It's a
red line. Genocide's a red line for them, and that's totally rational, even if Democrats don't like it. It's a rational choice. It is.
And it's not enough. Right? It's not enough to just say like, "Oh, the other guy's worse. Good luck." Like, the guy who wants to ban all Muslims. It's like, right. That does that then obviate the other person from committing any sort of atrocity and being like, well, look at the alternative, right?
Anybody's going to look better in comparison to Trump.
If under Joe Biden's leadership, Israel wiped out your entire family in Gaza, what the fuck do you care about Trump could possibly, or even will definitely be worse?
Yeah, right.
The worst has already happened to you. Who gives a crap if you are in that position and you are selfless? And it's not just about your well-being now. It's about your family members over there, the people who are still alive over there, who can be gone at any minute now if a bomb drops in the right place, or, the wrong place, obviously. The idea that things could be worse. How do you make that case to someone who is experiencing what they are experiencing right now? What could possibly be worse? What could be worse?
You're exactly right. Voit Free or Die. Hey, I'm our crew. Thank you for your continuous honest reporting on Palestine. I used to be a YouTube paid subscriber, but I canceled and used the money to join the Majority Report after I heard some of my favorite YouTubers being dishonest or cowardly on the topic post October 7th. H3 promoted the beheaded babies myth extensively, for example, and has not retracted since. Thank you again and again, and for showing us ways we can help, however small. There are a lot of people, I think, who are of good conscience who maybe just didn't follow Israel and Gaza or Israel-Palestine in any like meaningful way before October 7th, who will see a report in the New York Times or something and just run with it, and not understand like the long history of deep Israeli propaganda, which is only rivaled by Russian propaganda. Like, I'm being really serious in terms of global reach, only rivaled by Russian propaganda. I mean, U.S. propaganda too, but like we have a freer press here, honestly. The fact that people took all of that stuff at face value just goes to show that they were ignorant. But if they haven't retracted at this point, then it's malicious. Or not malicious, at least like shows something about their bias. Leftist Cajun, I live in Louisiana, and me and my wife did IVF 4 years ago to have my son, and then the second son naturally, yet had 3 embryos still frozen, but decided not to have more children. We could not donate them because my wife is over 37. We have to keep them frozen indefinitely for $600 a year. And I honestly have no idea what would happen if we couldn't pay the storage bill. It's nuts. Sam Voice. Love the show. Left is best. Wow. I mean, and Louisiana is no longer has a Democratic governor anymore. It's going to be a Republican. So make sure you talk to, if you have the ability, talk to a lawyer about that, because I don't want you to be in trouble if some, I don't know. But the fact that you're in a position like that is just, it's insane. All right, 5 more and then we'll get out of here. Sorry, we went a little late today, but ostentatious Rabbi Shmuley has built an entire debate platform on that New York Times article to defend Israel's actions, most recently on Piers Morgan with Norman Finkelstein. They won't address the correction at all. It's done its job. It's done its job. Israel does that. They did that with the hospital bombing. Israel would never bomb a hospital. It would never bomb a hospital. Every hospital has been like either damaged or completely destroyed in Gaza right now. And when, I spoke to Dr. Tarek Lubani last week, he said there are no functioning hospitals left by what he hears. BRB forever. The Judith Miller comparison is apt in some ways, but while her reporting was actually part of the justification for starting the Iraq War, the genocide in Gaza would be happening even if Gettleman's story had never been written. The Gettleman story is apologia for a genocide, a fabrication to back up justifications that were already well-worn and widespread. Well said. RFC Mo says, even worse, the SCOTUS response seems prepared to quibble over the extent of immunity, essentially changing the scope to enable it being sent back to the lower courts for even more delay. Oh, my God. Trilly Flops. If Tim Pool pivots to OnlyFans, I am blaming Emma directly for it. Margot from Mass, as Erica Jane told us, a photo of Denise Richards on OnlyFans is $8, so it must be hard to make tons of money on there. Laughing my ass off. Margot, I love when you writing with Real Housewives stuff. 400 Blowing Me says, also, Poor Things is out on digital. I highly recommend watching it. That's my next Oscar one that I have to watch, but I am seeing Dune 2 this weekend. And the final I am of the day. Small D Democrat, the Leap Day episode is one of the best episodes. What do you mean? It's like, so Lin-Manuel Morguera says, least favorite 30 Rock. Emma, no, I can trade the tears I have for your loss for candy from Leap Day William. Maybe I need to rewatch Leap Day William. I just find it like, the later seasons of 30 Rock do verge into that kind of level of absurdity, but it felt like a little bit out of place in that current moment of the show. But anyway, we can talk about it. 30 Rock's my favorite, so even the least favorite episode I love very deeply. All right, guys. Appreciate you all. Thanks so much for watching. Check out Doom, Scam Economy, Leftist Mafia tonight. Yes, I remembered this time. ESVN, Left Reckoning. Brandon is not with us, but he's alive. But check out the discourse.
Not with us presently.
Presently,
It's still with us on a temporal basis.
And check out the discourse. We will see you all tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But find better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years, while I shifted in and out of gear, waiting for my moment to happen. I don't know how much